The alchemical symbols, long dismissed as mystic scribbles, are now revealing their deeper significance. What if these symbols, once thought to be mere arcane secrets, held the key to unlocking the mysteries of existence itself? From the philosopher's stone to the Ouroboros, these symbols embody a language older than time, a code that transcends science and spirituality, hiding a truth so profound it could change our understanding of the universe. But why were these ancient secrets kept so guarded? Could the path to enlightenment be encoded in these very symbols? The search for the truth begins now, as we explore a hidden language that might hold the key to a new reality. The cryptic symbols of alchemy have long been regarded as little more than the odd scrawlings of mystics and philosophers, a relic of a bygone age when men sought the elusive philosopher's stone, the fabled elixir of life, and the secret to eternal wisdom. But in recent years, something has begun to shift. A pattern emerges, one that challenges everything we thought we knew about the alchemical tradition, a language hidden in plain sight for centuries. At the heart of this language is a code, buried beneath layers of metaphor and symbolism, a code that might just hold the answers to questions that have plagued humanity for millennia. Imagine standing in the presence of an alchemist, someone who has spent a lifetime poring over ancient manuscripts, carefully transcribing symbols, performing experiments in laboratories thick with the scent of sulfur and mercury. You ask them about the secret they are guarding, the knowledge that they have sacrificed so much to uncover, and they don't speak. Instead, they show you. They take you to the symbols, the triangle with the eye, the Ouroboros, the crossed keys. But these symbols aren't arbitrary. They aren't just mystical doodles. They are a language, a message meant for the initiated, a code designed to transcend the boundaries of the known world. They are meant to speak to something deeper within us, to awaken the dormant parts of our consciousness. To understand them is to enter a world beyond science, beyond religion, beyond even the physical realm. For centuries, alchemists kept this language hidden, obscured by layers of mysticism and arcane rituals. The question is why? Why such secrecy? Why such careful crafting of their symbols? The answer lies in the profound power these symbols held. These were not just signs to mark an experimental process. They were representations of cosmic truths. They encoded not just knowledge of chemistry or metallurgy but of the universe itself, its rhythms, its cycles, its very essence. To unlock these symbols was to unlock the very fabric of existence, to gain access to a knowledge that could change the world or destroy it. One might argue that the quest for understanding alchemy is not so much a pursuit of material wealth as it is a search for transcendence. What alchemists were really after was not gold, but the knowledge of how to transform the soul, to transcend the limitations of the human condition. The symbols they used were not meant to be understood in a straightforward manner. They were designed to evoke something deeper, and this, perhaps, is why so many were drawn to the study of alchemy in the first place. Not because of the promises of riches or immortality, but because these symbols held the potential to offer a glimpse into the divine. But then came the skepticism that emerged as the Enlightenment brought with it a new age of reason, where the mystical arts of alchemy were dismissed as mere superstition. The alchemical symbols, once the cornerstone of an ancient wisdom, were reduced to nothing more than the musings of men desperate to understand the mysteries of life. As science advanced, alchemy was overshadowed, left to gather dust in forgotten libraries, its symbols now regarded as little more than eccentric relics of a more ignorant time. The secrets they held seemed to vanish, their meaning lost to history. And yet, within this silence, the symbols themselves seemed to whisper, waiting for someone to come along and decipher their true meaning. The journey to uncover these secrets began in earnest in the early 20th century, when scholars and mystics alike began to realize that the symbols might hold more than mere superstition. These symbols, once thought to be arbitrary or meaningless, were in fact part of a greater, hidden language. A language that bridged the gap between material science and spiritual understanding. For the alchemists, the symbols weren't just a means of communication. They were a portal, a key to understanding the mysteries of the universe. In the intricate designs of the philosopher's stone, in the simple yet profound image of the Ouroboros, was encoded a truth so powerful that it threatened the very foundation of modern thought. But how were these symbols connected to the deeper truths of the universe? What was the link between alchemy's sacred geometry and the very structure of reality? The answer lies in the understanding that alchemy was not just a process of changing metals, it was a process of changing perception. At its core, alchemy was an exploration of transformation, not just of substances but of consciousness itself. The symbols, with their layered meanings, were designed to guide the alchemist on an inner journey, a path that led not to external riches but to an internal awakening. And yet, while many of the symbols have been dissected, interpreted, and studied, their true power remains elusive. Some believe the key to unlocking the code lies in the very materials the alchemists worked with: mercury, sulfur, lead, and gold. Each of these substances, according to alchemical tradition, symbolized a different stage of transformation. But it is the relationship between these materials, their interplay within the alchemist's laboratory, that offers a deeper insight. The laboratory itself was a microcosm of the universe, a space where the alchemist could perform the divine work of creation. The furnace, the alembic, the crucible, each of these was a tool not just for transformation but for self-purification. It is within this context that the true power of the alchemical symbols begins to reveal itself. The symbols are not just markers on a map, they are guides, each one leading the alchemist deeper into the mysteries of the cosmos and the mysteries of the soul. In this sense, alchemy is not just a science, it is a spiritual path. The transformation of base metals into gold, the creation of the elixir of life, and the discovery of the philosopher's stone are not just goals. They are metaphors for the alchemist's own journey toward enlightenment. The symbols, then, become a kind of map, a guide to the hidden realms of existence. Each symbol offers a key to unlocking a different aspect of the universe, from the most basic physical processes to the deepest metaphysical truths. They are designed to be decoded, but the process of decoding them is not straightforward. It requires the alchemist to approach the symbols with reverence and intuition, to look beyond their surface meaning and into the deeper currents of thought they represent. This is the heart of the alchemical language, a profound, multilayered system of thought that refuses to be understood with the rational mind alone. To truly grasp the meaning of these symbols, one must engage with them not just as objects of study but as spiritual tools. This is why alchemy, in its purest form, cannot be reduced to mere chemistry or metallurgy. It is a spiritual discipline, one that transcends the physical and touches upon the divine. As we begin to unravel the mystery of the alchemical code, we are faced with a question that goes beyond mere academic inquiry. What if these symbols were not just the creation of the alchemists themselves? What if they were a message from the past, a message meant to be understood in a different age? What if the symbols, in all their complexity, contain the answers to questions that have haunted humanity for millennia? The key, it seems, lies in understanding that the alchemist's symbols were not just a secret code, but a call to something deeper, an invitation to transcend the limitations of the material world and tap into a wisdom that lies beyond the veil of ordinary perception. In the end, the alchemical symbols are not just relics of a forgotten tradition. They are a living language, one that continues to speak to us today. Whether or not we fully understand their meaning, they offer us a glimpse into a world where the boundaries between the physical and the spiritual are blurred, where transformation is not just possible, but inevitable. The secret language of alchemy may remain hidden for now, but its power, the power to transform, to elevate, to awaken, remains as relevant today as it ever was. Perhaps, in time, we will uncover its full meaning. But for now, we are left with the tantalizing possibility that the language of alchemy may yet hold the key to a deeper understanding of the universe and of ourselves. Alchemy, the ancient practice that sought to transform base metals into gold and unlock the secret to immortality, has long captivated the imagination. But the true origins of alchemy are far more intricate and mysterious than one might expect. Its roots stretch back to the ancient civilizations of Egypt, where the seeds of alchemical wisdom were first sown, hidden beneath layers of myth and spirituality. The alchemical tradition did not emerge in isolation but as part of a larger framework of religious and philosophical thought that sought to understand the deepest truths of existence, life, and death. In ancient Egypt, alchemy was not merely the pursuit of material wealth, but a spiritual practice intertwined with the divine. The Egyptians believed in a world governed by unseen forces, and their entire worldview was based on the interplay between the physical and the metaphysical. Alchemical symbolism, in its earliest form, reflected this deep connection between the material and the spiritual realms. The Egyptians, with their intricate mythology and mystical beliefs, believed that the secrets of the universe were hidden in the transformation of matter. The cycle of life, death, and rebirth was embodied in their religious practices, and alchemy became a tool to unlock the secrets of this cycle, enabling the soul to transcend the confines of the material world. One of the most enduring legacies of Egyptian alchemy is the concept of as above, so below, an axiom that encapsulates the alchemical idea that the physical world mirrors the spiritual realm. This principle, rooted in ancient Egyptian thought, would go on to shape much of Western alchemy. The idea that the universe operates as a reflection of a higher spiritual order would become the foundation of alchemical practices, allowing practitioners to believe that by transforming substances in the physical world, they could affect change in the spiritual world as well. It was an idea of unity, a belief that the entire cosmos was connected through an invisible thread of energy, with human beings caught in the middle, struggling to unlock the mysteries of life, death, and everything beyond. The Egyptians' approach to alchemy was holistic, seeing it not as a mere manipulation of matter, but as a profound spiritual journey. The symbolic language they used to represent these processes, symbols like the Ouroboros, the serpent eating its own tail, the Ankh, the key of life, and the scarab were not only representations of physical processes but also expressions of spiritual truths. The Ouroboros, for instance, symbolized the eternal cycle of life, death, and rebirth. This image would later become a key symbol in alchemical tradition, representing the cyclical nature of transformation and the pursuit of perfection. The Ankh, with its representation of eternal life, would serve as a reminder of the alchemist's quest for spiritual immortality, transcending the limits of the flesh. In ancient Egypt, alchemy was not a solitary pursuit. It was deeply embedded in the religious and philosophical practices of the time. Priests and scholars, seen as the keepers of ancient wisdom, would practice alchemy as a way of aligning themselves with the divine. They believed that by understanding the processes of transformation in the material world, they could gain insight into the nature of the soul and the workings of the cosmos. The process of turning base metals into gold, which later became the focal point of European alchemy, was not seen as an end in itself, but as a metaphor for the purification of the soul. Just as the alchemists sought to transform lead into gold, so too did the spiritual seeker strive to transform the base aspects of their nature into the refined qualities of enlightenment. However, it is important to understand that alchemy in its early form was not just an Egyptian phenomenon. Alchemical thought spread across the ancient world, picking up different influences along the way. The Greek philosophers, particularly those associated with the Hermetic tradition, were instrumental in shaping the course of alchemical thought. Hermes Trismegistus, a legendary figure who is often regarded as the father of alchemy, synthesized Egyptian wisdom with Greek philosophical ideas, particularly those of Plato and Aristotle. Hermes was said to have received divine knowledge directly from the gods, and his writings would go on to form the cornerstone of Western alchemical thought. His most famous work, the Emerald Tablet, contains the famous axiom as above, so below, and serves as a guide for those seeking to understand the deeper secrets of the universe. The Hermetic tradition, blending Egyptian mysticism with Greek philosophy, laid the groundwork for the alchemical practices that would later flourish in Europe. While Egypt and Greece provided the foundation for alchemical thought, it was in the Roman Empire that alchemy began to take on a more practical and experimental form. The Romans were known for their technological advancements, and it was during this time that the first true alchemists, such as Zosimos of Panopolis, began to emerge. Zosimos, a philosopher and alchemist, wrote extensively about the alchemical process, and his work would later influence generations of alchemists throughout the Middle Ages and beyond. His writings, though heavily steeped in mysticism, also contained descriptions of laboratory practices, including the use of crucibles and distillation. This marked a shift from the purely philosophical and symbolic aspects of alchemy to a more practical, hands-on approach. The blending of mysticism and experimentation would become one of alchemy's defining features, as later alchemists would follow in Zosimo's footsteps, combining scientific inquiry with spiritual pursuits. However, the decline of the Roman Empire led to a loss of much of this alchemical knowledge. With the fall of Rome and the rise of Christianity, the alchemical tradition was largely suppressed. Alchemy was seen by many as a form of heresy, and the Church's growing influence led to the destruction of many alchemical texts. Yet, the tradition did not die. It went underground, preserved by secretive groups and individuals who continued to practice in private. As Europe entered the Dark Ages, alchemy would reemerge, though now under a different guise. In the Byzantine Empire and the Islamic world, scholars continued to study the alchemical writings of the ancients. Islamic alchemists, such as Jabir ibn Hayyan, translated and expanded upon Greek and Egyptian texts, furthering the understanding of chemical processes. They discovered new techniques for distillation, crystallization, and filtration, and they were the first to develop many of the substances that would later become essential to European alchemy. In the early Middle Ages, alchemy began to re-enter the Western world, primarily through the Islamic scholars. The translation of Arabic texts into Latin in the 12th century sparked a revival of alchemical thought in Europe. This period saw the birth of the alchemical tradition as we know it today, as alchemists like Albertus Magnus and Roger Bacon began to blend the spiritual aspects of alchemy with the emerging scientific methods of the time. The quest for the philosopher's stone, the elixir of life, and the transmutation of base metals into gold would now take center stage in Europe, but the ancient Egyptian roots of alchemy would remain firmly in place. The alchemical symbols, which had first been conceived in Egypt as part of a spiritual and philosophical system, would continue to guide the alchemists of the medieval and Renaissance periods in their search for both material wealth and spiritual enlightenment. Yet, despite its reemergence in Europe, alchemy's Egyptian roots were often forgotten or misunderstood. The practice became increasingly associated with materialism and greed, particularly in the Renaissance period when many alchemists focused on the idea of turning base metals into gold. The deeper spiritual and mystical aspects of alchemy were obscured as the pursuit of wealth took precedence. Still, the ancient Egyptian connection to alchemy persisted, even if it was not always recognized. The symbols, though altered and reinterpreted, still contained the essence of their original meanings. The Ouroboros, the Ankh, and the other symbols continued to carry the deep spiritual truths that had first been articulated by the Egyptians. As alchemy entered the modern era, it was increasingly relegated to the realm of pseudoscience, dismissed by many as a quaint relic of the past. However, even today, the symbols of alchemy continue to resonate with people who seek a deeper understanding of the mysteries of the universe. In the modern world, where science and spirituality are often seen as opposing forces, the ancient Egyptian roots of alchemy offer a reminder that the pursuit of knowledge is not just a physical or intellectual endeavor, but a spiritual journey. The symbols, hidden in plain sight, continue to speak to those who are willing to listen, offering a glimpse into a world where the material and the spiritual are one, and where the transformation of matter is also a transformation of the soul. And so, as we dig deeper into the history of alchemy, we come to realize that its roots are not confined to the pages of ancient texts or the laboratories of medieval alchemists. Alchemy's true origins lie in the ancient wisdom of Egypt, where the understanding of the universe as a reflection of the divine first took shape. From Egypt, this knowledge spread, evolving and adapting over time, but always retaining its original essence. The ancient symbols, now scattered across the landscape of history, continue to carry the same profound messages they held thousands of years ago. They are not just relics of a forgotten past. They are keys to unlocking a deeper understanding of the world and our place within it. The quest for the philosopher's stone is perhaps the most enduring and mysterious pursuit in the history of alchemy. For centuries, alchemists dedicated their lives to uncovering the secret of this legendary substance, which was said to possess the power to turn base metals into gold and grant immortality through the elixir of life. But was the philosopher's stone merely a symbol of unattainable perfection, or did it represent something far more profound and elusive? The story of the stone's search is not just one of material gain and scientific experimentation. It is a journey of deep spiritual transformation, a pursuit of inner alchemy that would ultimately change the lives of those who dared to seek it. The earliest mention of the philosopher's stone can be found in ancient texts, though its exact origins are shrouded in mystery. The concept itself seems to have emerged from the Egyptian, Greek, and later Hermetic traditions, where it was seen as the ultimate alchemical goal, a substance capable of transmuting lead into gold and bestowing eternal life. This, however, was no simple chemical reaction. To the alchemists, the philosopher's stone represented far more than the promise of wealth or immortality. It was the key to unlocking the secrets of the universe, a symbol of divine wisdom, and the means to transcend the limits of the human condition. In the beginning, the stone was a metaphor, a symbol of the transformation of the alchemist's own soul. The process of turning base metals into gold was not just a physical act. It was seen as a spiritual journey, an alchemical marriage between the material and the divine. The philosopher's stone was not only a substance that could transmute metals, but also a manifestation of the alchemist's inner potential to evolve and attain enlightenment. In this sense, the search for the stone was an inward quest as much as an external one, a journey of personal metamorphosis that mirrored the transformation of the material world. It was during the medieval period that the search for the philosopher's stone began to take on its most recognizable form. By then, alchemists had begun to focus more on the practical aspects of their craft, trying to unlock the secrets of chemical processes and find ways to transmute base metals into gold. The stone became the ultimate symbol of success in the alchemical tradition, the holy grail of their work. And so, many alchemists began dedicating their lives to the search for it, employing various techniques, theories, and mystical practices in an attempt to create the stone. One of the earliest and most famous alchemists to claim knowledge of the philosopher's stone was Nicolas Flamel, a 14th-century French scribe. According to legend, Flamel came into possession of an ancient manuscript that detailed the process of creating the stone. This manuscript, which was said to be written by the angelic figure Hermes Trismegistus, contained instructions for the creation of the elixir of life and the transmutation of metals into gold. After studying the manuscript, Flamel and his wife Perenelle supposedly succeeded in creating the philosopher's stone, gaining vast wealth and longevity as a result. Flamel's name became synonymous with the stone, and his supposed discovery of it inspired countless others to follow in his footsteps. Flamel's story, however, is likely more myth than fact. While it is true that he was an alchemist and that he was reputed to have lived for many years, there is no concrete evidence that he ever discovered the philosopher's stone or that he achieved the immortality and wealth associated with it. Nonetheless, his legend became an important part of the alchemical tradition, and his name continued to inspire generations of alchemists in their search for the stone. Flamel's story, like many others throughout history, highlights a central theme in the alchemical pursuit: the blending of fact and fiction, of science and mysticism, which makes it difficult to separate truth from myth. As time went on, the search for the philosopher's stone became a deeply spiritual and philosophical endeavor. Alchemists began to understand that the stone was not simply a physical object but a symbol of the inner transformation that occurred as part of the alchemical process. The true philosopher's stone, they believed, was not found in the laboratory but within the alchemist's own soul. The act of creating gold, while still a goal, was now viewed as a reflection of the alchemist's ability to transmute his own inner base metals, the negative aspects of his personality, his fears, his desires, into spiritual enlightenment. In this sense, the search for the philosopher's stone became a metaphor for the search for personal and spiritual perfection. This shift in focus led to the development of the concept of spiritual alchemy. While physical alchemy still centered around the transmutation of metals, spiritual alchemy concerned itself with the purification of the soul. In this sense, the philosopher's stone became an allegory for the philosopher or enlightened soul, one who had attained the highest level of wisdom and understanding. Alchemists such as Paracelsus and Robert Fludd embraced this idea, arguing that the creation of the stone was a process of spiritual awakening rather than a material endeavor. The stone, they believed, was not something that could be created in a laboratory, but was an internal transformation that required the alchemist to undergo a process of personal refinement. Only by purging themselves of ignorance, fear, and pride could they hope to attain the true wisdom embodied by the philosopher's stone. Throughout the Renaissance, the search for the stone took on new dimensions, as alchemists sought to reconcile their mystical practices with the emerging scientific understanding of the world. Figures like Leonardo da Vinci and Isaac Newton, both of whom were fascinated by alchemy, sought to combine the mystical aspects of the tradition with the empirical methods of science. For them, the philosopher's stone was not just a spiritual concept but something that could be approached through the lens of reason and experimentation. The blending of these two worlds, the mystical and the scientific, would have a profound impact on the future of alchemy and the way in which it was practiced. It also laid the groundwork for the eventual birth of modern chemistry, as alchemists began to move away from their mystical beliefs and toward more empirical methods of experimentation. In the centuries that followed, the quest for the philosopher's stone became less about material gain and more about the search for knowledge. Alchemy, which had once been a blend of spiritual wisdom and scientific experimentation, gradually evolved into modern chemistry. The stone, however, never lost its mystique. Even as alchemists turned their attention away from the physical aspects of their craft, they continued to view the philosopher's stone as a symbol of the highest attainment, the pinnacle of human understanding. But what exactly did the philosopher's stone represent in the end? Was it the ultimate alchemical achievement, a substance capable of transmuting base metals into gold and granting immortality, or was it a symbol of the alchemist's own journey toward enlightenment? For centuries, alchemists sought the stone, but perhaps the real lesson was that the philosopher's stone was never meant to be a physical object. Instead, it was a metaphor for the alchemist's inner transformation, a symbol of the process by which the soul could be purified and perfected. The quest for the philosopher's stone was not about creating gold. It was about creating wisdom, understanding, and, ultimately, self-mastery. In the modern era, the philosopher's stone continues to captivate the imagination. While its role in alchemical practice has been largely superseded by the discoveries of modern science, the symbol of the stone still holds a deep and powerful resonance. To this day, it remains a symbol of the human desire to transcend the limitations of the material world, to achieve a kind of perfection that is beyond the reach of ordinary experience. Whether viewed as a literal object or as a symbol of inner transformation, the philosopher's stone continues to inspire those who seek to understand the deepest mysteries of existence. The story of the philosopher's stone is not simply one of alchemical experimentation or the search for material wealth. It is the story of the human desire to reach beyond the physical world and touch the divine. The stone, whether it exists or not, represents the eternal human quest for knowledge, for understanding, and for transcendence. And in the end, perhaps the greatest secret of the philosopher's stone is not its ability to turn lead into gold, but its power to transform the soul and lead the seeker to a deeper understanding of the nature of existence itself. At the heart of alchemy lies its most intriguing and mysterious aspect, the use of symbols. These symbols, often seen as esoteric and cryptic, were more than just decorative elements in alchemical manuscripts. They were powerful codes designed to convey hidden truths about the world, the self, and the universe. For the alchemists, these symbols were not mere signs to mark their experiments. They were tools that carried profound spiritual meaning. They were a language unto themselves, one that spoke to the deepest layers of the human psyche and the cosmos, blending material and spiritual realms into a single unified field of thought. From the very beginning of alchemical history, symbols were used to encapsulate complex ideas and concepts that transcended the limitations of language and the physical world. Each symbol in alchemy was a key to understanding a particular aspect of the transformative process, whether it was the transmutation of substances, the purification of the soul, or the unveiling of cosmic truths. Yet, the symbols were not simply representational. They were designed to be experienced. They were meant to be meditated upon, pondered, and internalized. Their true meaning could not be grasped intellectually alone. It required an intuitive understanding that could only come from a deep engagement with the mysteries they represented. The most famous of alchemical symbols is the philosopher's stone itself. The stone, often depicted as a mysterious geometric shape or a glowing object, was the ultimate symbol of transformation in alchemy. To the alchemist, the stone represented the key to achieving the great work, turning base metals into gold, creating the elixir of life, and attaining spiritual enlightenment. But while the physical aspects of the stone were the most sought after, its true significance was far deeper. The stone was a symbol of the process of personal and spiritual transformation, a metaphor for the alchemist's own journey toward perfection. It was not something that could be obtained through physical means alone. It had to be earned through inner work and purification. The stone represented the culmination of the alchemist's quest for wisdom, and its creation mirrored the refinement of the soul. The Ouroboros, the serpent devouring its own tail, is another of the most iconic symbols in alchemy. This image has been used for centuries to represent the cyclical nature of life, death, and rebirth. In alchemical terms, the Ouroboros symbolizes the endless process of transformation, where one stage of existence gives way to the next. It is a powerful symbol of the eternal cycle of creation and destruction, of the interconnectedness of all things. The serpent, often depicted in a circular form, represents the unity of opposites, the male and female, the light and the dark, the material and the spiritual. This symbol reflects the alchemical belief that all things in the universe are interconnected and that transformation is not a linear process but a continuous, cyclical one. The use of the Ouroboros goes beyond its role as a mere symbol of eternal recurrence. For the alchemist, it represented the ultimate process of self-realization and purification. The act of the serpent eating its own tail can be seen as an allegory for the alchemist's own journey of self-overcoming. Just as the serpent devours itself only to regenerate anew, so too must the alchemists destroy their own ego and false self in order to be reborn into a higher state of being. This symbol speaks to the alchemical idea that true transformation occurs only when one is willing to let go of the old and embrace the new. It is a powerful reminder that, in order to achieve spiritual enlightenment, one must undergo a process of inner destruction and renewal. Another widely recognized symbol in alchemy is the square and the circle. These two geometric shapes are often used together, and they represent the unity of opposites. The square, with its four corners, symbolizes the material world and the four elements: earth, water, fire, and air. It represents the physical, finite realm in which we live. The circle, on the other hand, symbolizes the divine, the infinite, and the spiritual realm. It is the symbol of perfection, wholeness, and unity. When these two shapes are combined, they represent the reconciliation of the material and the spiritual, the union of opposites, and the alchemist's attempt to bring harmony between the physical and the divine. This union of square and circle is also a reflection of the alchemist's own journey of integrating the material and spiritual aspects of their being, seeking balance and unity in all aspects of life. In the same vein, the triangle is another important symbol in alchemy. The triangle, often depicted with an eye at its center, is a symbol of divine wisdom and the pursuit of higher knowledge. The triangle represents the threefold nature of reality: spirit, soul, and body, and the alchemist's task of aligning these three aspects of their being in order to achieve transformation. The eye within the triangle, often referred to as the all-seeing eye, symbolizes the divine insight that the alchemist seeks to attain through their work. This symbol is a reminder that true wisdom comes not from the intellect alone, but from a deep connection to the divine, a higher understanding that transcends ordinary perception. The use of these symbols in alchemy was not arbitrary or purely decorative. Each symbol carried with it a profound meaning, one that resonated with the alchemist on a deep, intuitive level. To understand these symbols was to understand the nature of reality itself, how it was created, how it functioned, and how it could be transformed. But the alchemical symbols were not meant to be understood in a purely intellectual sense. They were, in fact, part of a much larger spiritual practice, one that required the alchemist to go beyond the intellect and engage with the symbols on a more profound, mystical level. One of the most compelling aspects of alchemical symbolism is its ability to convey complex spiritual truths through seemingly simple images. For example, the alchemical symbol for Mercury, often depicted as a circle with a crescent at its top and two horns, was not just a representation of the element, but also symbolized the alchemist's own inner nature. Mercury, in alchemical terms, was seen as the spirit of the material world, the substance that could change form and move between different states of being. In this sense, the symbol for Mercury represented the alchemist's own ability to shift between different states of consciousness, to transcend the limits of the material world and access higher planes of existence. Likewise, The alchemical symbol for salt, which often appears as a circle with a cross inside, is not merely a reference to the substance itself, but to the alchemist's relationship with the earth. Salt, in alchemical terms, was associated with purification, preservation, and the solidification of spiritual knowledge. The cross within the circle symbolized the union of spirit and matter, the meeting point of the divine and the earthly. It was through the process of transmuting salt, both physically and symbolically, that the alchemist could purify themselves and achieve greater insight into the mysteries of the universe. The use of color in alchemical symbolism also plays a crucial role in conveying deeper meanings. Alchemists often used color to represent different stages of the transformation process. Black, for instance, symbolized the initial stage of chaos and decay, the breaking down of the old order. White represented purity, clarity, and the dawning of new wisdom. Red, a color closely associated with fire, symbolized passion, intensity, and the active process of transformation. Gold, the ultimate goal of alchemy, represented the perfected state, the achievement of spiritual enlightenment and material wealth in perfect harmony. These colors were not just arbitrary choices but reflections of the alchemist's inner journey, the stages of transformation they must undergo to reach their ultimate goal. In this way, the alchemical symbols served not only as representations of material substances and processes but as maps to the soul. Each symbol was a step on the alchemist's spiritual journey, a guide to the deeper mysteries of the self and the universe. They were tools for inner transformation, a way for the alchemist to map the path toward enlightenment. But perhaps most importantly, they were a way of communicating with the divine, of bridging the gap between the material world and the higher spiritual planes. The symbols were the alchemist's language, their way of speaking to the cosmos, of understanding the forces that govern the universe, and of transforming both the world and themselves in the process. Despite their seemingly cryptic nature, the symbols of alchemy remain a powerful and evocative tool for understanding the mysteries of the world. They continue to speak to us today, calling us to look beyond the surface and uncover the deeper truths that lie hidden beneath. Whether used in ancient texts or modern spiritual practices, these symbols remain as potent and mysterious as ever, reminding us of the transformative power of knowledge and the quest for deeper understanding. The investigation into alchemy's hidden language of symbols is not just an academic exercise but a journey into the very heart of human history and consciousness. Over centuries, these symbols have been misinterpreted, misunderstood, and sometimes deliberately obscured. Yet, in their deepest form, they represent an attempt by alchemists to decode the very mysteries of existence, offering us a glimpse into a world where the physical and metaphysical realms intersect. The alchemical symbols were never just arbitrary markings or mystical signs. They were the means by which the alchemists hoped to communicate with the divine and to uncover profound secrets about nature, the self, and the universe. To truly understand these symbols, we must delve into the minds of those who created them, people who lived in a world of paradoxes and mysteries. For the alchemists, their symbols were not only representations of substances or processes. They were tools of transformation, gateways to hidden knowledge. But understanding this requires more than a superficial reading of alchemical texts. It necessitates an exploration of the philosophical and spiritual framework that underpinned their work. The symbols were, in many ways, the outward expression of an inner process, a process that was both intellectual and spiritual, scientific and mystical. This duality is what makes alchemy so fascinating, and why its symbols continue to intrigue us today. One of the central mysteries of alchemical symbolism lies in its connection to ancient Egyptian thought. It is no coincidence that many of the most recognizable alchemical symbols have roots in Egyptian mythology and cosmology. The Egyptians, with their complex belief systems and profound understanding of the cycles of life, death, and rebirth, set the stage for alchemical thought. The Egyptians believed that the secrets of the universe were hidden in plain sight, encoded in the natural world and in the movements of the stars. The alchemists, inheriting this tradition, understood that the symbols they used were not just abstract representations, but reflections of these hidden truths. This understanding of alchemical symbolism as a means of revealing cosmic secrets brings us to one of the most enigmatic symbols in the alchemical tradition, the philosopher's stone. Over the centuries, countless alchemists have sought the stone, believing that it contained the key to unlocking the deepest secrets of life and matter. The stone was said to have the power to transmute base metals into gold, to grant immortality, and to bestow spiritual enlightenment. But as alluring as these promises were, the true meaning of the Philosopher's Stone was far more complex and multifaceted. At its core, the Philosopher's Stone represented the ultimate achievement in alchemy, not just in terms of material wealth or physical transformation, but in spiritual evolution. The search for the stone was not about creating gold. It was about achieving inner gold, the gold of spiritual purity. To create the Philosopher's Stone was to transcend the limitations of the ego and the material world, to reach a state of perfect harmony between body, mind, and spirit. This process of inner transformation was symbolized by the stone, which represented the alchemist's own journey toward enlightenment. However, the true nature of the Philosopher's Stone cannot be understood solely from the perspective of the material world. To the alchemists, the stone was not just a substance to be created in a laboratory. It was an allegory for the alchemist's own spiritual journey. The transformation of lead into gold, for instance, was not merely a process of chemical transmutation but a metaphor for the purification of the soul. Lead, representing the base and imperfect nature of the alchemist, had to be purified and refined through inner work, just as gold represents the perfected soul. The stone, therefore, was a symbol of spiritual perfection, something that could only be attained through perseverance, self-discipline, and a deep understanding of both the material and spiritual realms. One of the key aspects of alchemical symbolism is the idea of unity, the concept that all things in the universe are interconnected. This idea is reflected in several important alchemical symbols, such as the Ouroboros, the serpent that devours its own tail. The Ouroboros represents the cyclical nature of life, death, and rebirth, suggesting that nothing in the universe exists in isolation. Everything is connected, and every transformation leads to the next. This idea of interconnectedness is central to the alchemical worldview, which saw the material world as a reflection of the spiritual realm. The alchemists believed that by understanding the processes of change in the physical world, they could also understand the deeper, spiritual forces that govern the universe. The Ouroboros, as a symbol of this unity, captured the essence of alchemical thought, that the material and spiritual realms were not separate, but two aspects of the same underlying reality. Alongside the Ouroboros, the image of the phoenix also plays a significant role in alchemical symbolism. The phoenix, a mythical bird that rises from its own ashes, represents the idea of resurrection and renewal. In alchemical terms, the phoenix symbolizes the transformation of the alchemist's soul, as it undergoes a process of death and rebirth. This death is not a physical one, but a spiritual one, a shedding of the old self in order to make way for a new, purified self. The phoenix's rebirth from the ashes is an image of spiritual regeneration, the alchemist's ultimate goal, to transcend the limitations of the ego and to attain a higher state of being. As we explore the symbolic language of alchemy, it becomes clear that these symbols were not merely intellectual or academic constructs. They were a means of experiencing the deeper truths of the universe. To the alchemists, the symbols were not simply abstract ideas, but lived experiences. The process of studying these symbols, meditating on them, and embodying their meanings was a central part of the alchemical work. It was through this process of engagement that the alchemist hoped to attain the wisdom and understanding necessary to transform themselves and their world. But while these symbols held profound spiritual meaning, they also had practical implications for the alchemist's work in the laboratory. Many of the symbols used in alchemy were connected to specific substances or processes. For example, the symbol for mercury, a circle with a crescent at the top, represented the fluid, mercurial nature of the element. Mercury was seen as a symbol of transformation because it could shift between solid and liquid states. Similarly, the symbol for sulfur, often depicted as a triangle, represented the fiery, active principle in alchemy, an essential force in the process of transformation. In this way, the alchemical symbols were a fusion of the physical and the metaphysical, offering a way to understand both the material and spiritual aspects of transformation. Moreover, The alchemical process itself was often depicted through a series of symbols that corresponded to different stages of the work. The first stage, often represented by the color black or the symbol of the crow, represented the initial phase of dissolution and purification. The alchemist would break down the material, stripping it of its impurities in order to begin the process of transmutation. The next stage, represented by the color white, symbolized the purification and refinement of the material. It was in this phase that the alchemist sought to bring out the highest essence of the substance, preparing it for the final stage of transformation. The final stage, represented by the color red or the symbol of the lion, signified the completion of the work, the creation of the philosopher's stone or the attainment of spiritual enlightenment. These stages were not merely about chemical reactions. They were symbolic of the alchemist's own spiritual evolution, a process of purification and refinement that mirrored the transformation of the material world. As we move further into the exploration of alchemical symbolism, we begin to see that the alchemists were not simply interested in creating gold or discovering the secret of immortality. What they were truly seeking was a deeper understanding of the universe and their place within it. The alchemical symbols were not just about understanding the physical world. They were about understanding the relationship between the material and spiritual realms. They were a means of bridging the gap between the known and the unknown, between the finite and the infinite. In this sense, the symbols were more than just tools for personal transformation. They were a means of connecting with the divine. The alchemists believed that by understanding and embodying these symbols, they could tap into the cosmic forces that governed the universe. The symbols were a way of communicating with the divine, of seeking guidance from higher realms of consciousness. For the alchemist, the work was not just about the transformation of substances. It was about the transformation of consciousness itself. Each symbol, each process, was a step along the path to greater understanding, greater wisdom, and ultimately greater enlightenment. As we continue to investigate these alchemical symbols, we realize that they are not just relics of an ancient, forgotten tradition. They are keys to a deeper understanding of the mysteries of existence. The symbols of alchemy are as relevant today as they were centuries ago, offering us a glimpse into a world where science and spirituality, material and spiritual, are not separate but intertwined. To unlock the secrets of these symbols is to unlock the secrets of the universe itself, to understand the deeper truths that lie beyond the surface of reality. In this sense, the symbols are not just relics of the past. They are living, breathing forces that continue to guide us on our own journey of transformation and understanding. Alchemy's journey through history is not only marked by the ambitious quest for material transformation, but also by its intricate relationship with spirituality, philosophy, and religion. For centuries, alchemy was not solely the pursuit of turning lead into gold or creating the mythical philosopher's stone. It was deeply intertwined with a profound understanding of the human soul and its capacity for metamorphosis. The alchemists, far from being mere scientists in the modern sense, were both mystics and philosophers, seeking to harmonize the physical with the metaphysical. Their pursuit of material gold was a mere reflection of their desire for spiritual enlightenment, an aspiration to refine the very essence of their beings. Yet, this hidden journey of self-transformation and spiritual ascent was not always understood by those outside the alchemical tradition. The process of inner purification, as it was conveyed through the symbolism of alchemy, has often been misinterpreted and misunderstood. At the heart of the alchemical tradition was the idea that the universe operates as a living organism, a vast interconnected web of matter and spirit. For the alchemist, to understand the physical world was to understand the divine forces that governed it. The belief that every physical substance had a spiritual counterpart was a fundamental tenet of alchemical thought. The alchemists believed that the transformation of matter could reveal hidden truths about the workings of the universe and, most importantly, the hidden nature of the self. They saw their work as an inward journey, mirroring the transformation of the material world. By refining substances in the laboratory, the alchemist was also refining their own spirit, seeking to purge themselves of their base qualities and bring about their own inner purification. The use of alchemical symbols to convey this inner journey of transformation is what makes the alchemical tradition so rich and enigmatic. Every process, from the dissolution of metals to the transmutation of one substance into another, was seen as symbolic of a deeper metaphysical transformation. The process of turning base metals into gold was, in essence, a metaphor for the alchemists' quest to transform the base elements of their own soul, ignorance, fear, desire, into the pure essence of wisdom and enlightenment. The ultimate goal was not to acquire wealth but to attain a higher state of consciousness, to become attuned to the divine intelligence that governed the universe. However, this idea of spiritual transformation through the physical manipulation of matter did not evolve in isolation. Alchemical thought was deeply influenced by the religious and philosophical traditions of the time. In particular, the synthesis of Hermeticism, Neoplatonism, and Christian mysticism played a key role in shaping the alchemical worldview. The teachings of Hermes Trismegistus, who was believed to be an amalgamation of the Egyptian god Thoth and the Greek god Hermes, formed the philosophical foundation for much of Western alchemy. The Hermetic axiom, as above, so below, encapsulated the alchemical belief that the material world is a reflection of the spiritual realm. This principle was not just a guiding tenet for alchemical experimentation. It was a key to understanding the interconnectedness of all things and the unity of the physical and spiritual dimensions. In the world of alchemy, the idea that the material world was an expression of divine will and spiritual principles was central. For the alchemists, everything in nature had meaning, and every process was a reflection of a divine order. The four classical elements, earth, water, fire, and air, were seen as the building blocks of creation, each representing a different aspect of both the material and spiritual realms. Earth was associated with the body and materiality, water with emotion and the subconscious, fire with spirit and transformation, and air with intellect and understanding. The alchemist's task was to bring these elements into balance, both within themselves and in the external world. In this view, the process of transformation was not just about altering physical substances. It was about understanding and mastering the forces that shape existence. The alchemists believed that by engaging with these forces, through the manipulation of metals, the distillation of substances, and the use of symbolic rituals, they could uncover the deeper secrets of creation. But even more than that, they believed that through this process, they could become like the divine, achieving a state of enlightenment that transcended the limitations of the human condition. As alchemy evolved over time, it became more closely associated with the search for immortality. This quest was not necessarily for eternal life in the physical sense, but for the kind of immortality that could be achieved through spiritual ascension. The philosopher's stone, often depicted as the culmination of alchemical work, was said to possess the power to grant eternal life. But this life was not merely physical. It was a life of wisdom and transcendence, a life free from the shackles of material existence. The elixir of life, which was believed to be derived from the philosopher's stone, was thought to bestow immortality by purging the body of disease and aging, and granting the alchemist the ability to live in a state of perfect health. Yet, in the alchemical view, this immortality was not simply a physical achievement. It was a spiritual one. The true goal of the elixir of life was to purify the soul and make it one with the divine. But the alchemist's search for spiritual immortality was not only about personal transformation. It was also about the pursuit of divine knowledge. The work of the alchemist was seen as an act of divine revelation, a process through which the alchemist would come to understand the deeper principles of existence. To create gold was not merely to gain material wealth. It was to gain access to the highest form of wisdom. Gold, in alchemical thought, represented spiritual perfection, the ultimate state of enlightenment. It was a symbol of the alchemist's success in achieving balance, harmony, and unity between the physical and spiritual realms. Despite the powerful spiritual dimension of alchemy, it was not without its material aspect. The alchemists believed that by refining substances in the laboratory, they could reveal the hidden potential within matter. This belief was rooted in the idea that all substances, no matter how base or seemingly insignificant, contained the seeds of transformation. Just as the alchemists sought to turn base metals into gold, so too did they believe that everything in the universe had the potential to be refined and elevated to a higher state of being. This process of refinement was not only physical but also spiritual, as the alchemists worked to purify their own soul through their engagement with the material world. The connection between material transformation and spiritual enlightenment became even more pronounced during the Renaissance, a period in which alchemy saw a resurgence of interest. It was during this time that some of the greatest alchemical minds, such as Paracelsus and Robert Fludd, came to prominence. These thinkers began to explore the intersection of alchemy and the emerging scientific methods of the time. While they still maintained a mystical view of alchemy, they also began to see the potential for alchemical processes to contribute to the development of modern science. One of the key breakthroughs in this period was the development of the concept of spiritual alchemy, which emphasized the inner journey of the alchemist as the true focus of their work. Spiritual alchemy was less concerned with the creation of material substances and more focused on the refinement of the soul. The work of the alchemist, in this view, was a metaphor for the soul's journey toward divine union. This shift in focus reflected a broader shift in the Western worldview, where scientific inquiry and spiritual practice were increasingly seen as two sides of the same coin, rather than being in opposition to each other. Yet, even as alchemy moved into the realm of spiritual philosophy, the practical elements of the tradition remained deeply entrenched. Alchemists continued to conduct experiments, refining their techniques and searching for new ways to unlock the secrets of nature. The alchemical laboratory became a sacred space, a place where both material and spiritual transformation could occur. The alchemists, in their work, sought to understand the deeper forces of nature and to bring those forces into alignment with divine will. By doing so, they hoped to achieve both personal and cosmic harmony, bridging the gap between the material and spiritual realms. Over the centuries, as alchemy evolved and gave birth to modern chemistry, its spiritual and philosophical dimensions were often pushed to the margins. However, the core principles of alchemy, the idea of transformation, purification, and the unity of material and spiritual realms, continue to resonate in modern spiritual practices. Today, alchemy is no longer seen solely as a scientific pursuit, but as a path of self-discovery and personal growth. The symbols, rituals, and processes of alchemy continue to provide a framework for those seeking deeper understanding and connection with the mysteries of the universe. The legacy of alchemy, therefore, lies not only in its contributions to science but in its enduring spiritual teachings. The alchemical quest for spiritual enlightenment, the search for the philosopher's stone, and the desire to transform the base elements of the soul are as relevant today as they were in ancient times. The journey of the alchemist is a journey of self-refinement and inner transformation, one that transcends time and place. And though the material goals of alchemy may have faded into history, its spiritual quest for knowledge, wisdom, and transcendence remains a profound and timeless pursuit. Alchemy, for all its historical allure, is a tradition that spans much more than just the medieval quest for gold or the search for the elusive philosopher's stone. While it may be easy to dismiss alchemical symbols as mere mystical and arcane representations of the material world, to do so would be to miss the profound depths of understanding they offer. The secret language of alchemical symbols is, in fact, an intricate tapestry woven through centuries of human exploration into the fundamental nature of existence itself. To truly unravel the mysteries of these symbols requires a dive not only into the minds of the alchemists but into the very psyche of the human condition, across ages of scientific discovery, spiritual enlightenment, and philosophical inquiry. It is crucial to understand that for alchemists, their work was as much about the internal process of transformation as it was about external experimentation. The laboratory, with its retorts, crucibles, and alembics, was not merely a place for material refinement but a sacred space in which the soul was simultaneously undergoing its own transmutation. Every ingredient, every symbol, and every step in the alchemical process had an esoteric significance that resonated with the broader concept of self-transformation. To the alchemists, the journey toward spiritual and material perfection was synonymous. One could not occur without the other. The physical work was simply a reflection of the spiritual alchemy happening within. One of the key aspects of the alchemical tradition was the idea of as above, so below, a phrase that sums up the central concept of unity and interconnection between the microcosm and the macrocosm. This hermetic principle reflects the belief that the human being, the earth, the stars, and the divine are all interconnected in a harmonious system. The alchemist believed that to alter one element within this system would impact the entire chain of existence, whether on a material or spiritual level. Thus, the laboratory experiments were more than just practical efforts to isolate the elusive gold. They were symbolic acts that mirrored the alchemist's own quest to purify and refine their inner life. Each alchemical symbol, from the Ouroboros to the serpent, the triangle, the square, and the colors associated with transformation, had a specific, layered meaning designed to guide the practitioner toward the realization of this interconnectedness. The Ouroboros, for example, was not just a snake devouring its own tail. It was a symbol of eternal recurrence and cyclical change, representing the never-ending process of renewal that mirrors the very nature of existence itself. It is a profound reminder that everything, both in nature and in the human soul, is subject to perpetual cycles of death and rebirth. The alchemist's task was to recognize these cycles, to understand them, and ultimately to master them in order to achieve transcendence. Likewise, the use of the four elements earth, air, fire, and water was fundamental to alchemical philosophy. These elements represented both the material aspects of the world and the forces that shaped human experience. Earth was associated with the body and the physical realm, water with emotion and the subconscious, fire with spirit and transformation, and air with intellect and understanding. In the alchemical process, the alchemist's role was to bring these elements into balance and harmony within themselves. The work was not merely about separating the elements in substances but about integrating them within the alchemist's own being. The very transformation of materials in the laboratory, whether it was the purification of a metal or the creation of an elixir, was a reflection of the alchemist's own efforts to harmonize the internal elements of their soul. The symbols of alchemy, then, were never static. They were living, breathing representations of the forces at play in both the material and spiritual realms. The alchemist's goal was to internalize these symbols, to let them guide the practitioner through an inner journey of self-realization and enlightenment. In this sense, the symbols were both tools of transformation and reflections of the process itself. They acted as a bridge between the inner and outer worlds, allowing the alchemists to align their consciousness with the divine principles that govern the universe. One of the most powerful and enigmatic symbols in alchemy is the Philosopher's Stone. While this symbol is most often associated with the quest for material gold and the creation of the elixir of life, its true significance transcends these earthly goals. The Philosopher's Stone represents spiritual enlightenment and perfection, the culmination of the alchemical work. It is the symbol of the alchemist's ultimate transformation, the point at which all the elements, earth, air, fire, and water, are balanced within the practitioner, and they are able to transcend the limitations of the physical world. The stone, in its true form, is not a physical object but a state of being, a representation of the perfected soul, the fully enlightened alchemist, who has purified themselves of all base desires and has achieved a higher state of consciousness. For many alchemists, the Philosopher's Stone was also symbolic of a deeper, mystical connection with the divine. It represented the union of opposites, the masculine and feminine, the spiritual and material, the conscious and unconscious, and the achievement of balance between them. The alchemist's work was seen as a sacred act of creation, one that was intimately tied to divine wisdom and the universal laws that governed all of existence. In this sense, the pursuit of the Philosopher's Stone was not just a personal journey but a cosmic one. It was a quest to understand and align with the very forces that underpin the universe. As we look deeper into the esoteric side of alchemy, it becomes evident that the symbols were not simply meant to be understood through the intellect alone. Alchemical symbols were designed to engage the entire being, the mind, the heart, and the spirit. They were meant to provoke not just understanding but experience. In the same way that a sacred text might be meditated upon and interpreted on multiple levels, alchemical symbols were meant to be approached with reverence and an open heart. The symbol of the triangle, for example, with its all-seeing eye at the center, was not only a representation of divine wisdom but a call to open the third eye, the inner perception that allows the practitioner to transcend ordinary perception and understand the deeper layers of reality. This inner transformation was mirrored by the outer work in the alchemical laboratory. The alchemist's use of fire, for example, represented the burning away of impurities from both materials and the soul. Fire, in alchemical terms, is the agent of transformation, It is the force that refines and purifies. Just as metals are subjected to the flames in order to release their hidden potential, so too must the alchemist be willing to endure the fire of self-refinement. Only by allowing oneself to be tested, to be subjected to intense purification, could the alchemist hope to emerge as gold, a symbol of spiritual and material perfection. Alchemy's philosophical underpinnings were, in many ways, a response to the limitations of the materialist worldview that had begun to take shape during the Renaissance. While the scientific revolution, with its emphasis on empirical observation and experimentation, was starting to take center stage, alchemy remained firmly rooted in the idea that the universe was a living organism. For the alchemist, the material world was not dead or inert but imbued with spirit, with divine intelligence. The alchemical work was thus an attempt to understand the hidden forces that guided the world, to see beyond the surface of things and access the deeper, spiritual dimensions of reality. This was not merely a scientific experiment. It was a mystical, spiritual quest to uncover the secrets of life itself. It is also important to recognize that alchemical symbolism was often intentionally cryptic, designed to conceal the true meaning from the uninitiated. Many alchemical texts were written in an obscure language, filled with complex metaphors, allegories, and visual symbols, in part to protect the sacred knowledge from being misused. The alchemists knew that the true work could not be undertaken without the proper preparation and spiritual discipline. To the unprepared, the symbols might appear as mere codes or puzzles, but to the adept, they were keys to unlocking the deepest secrets of existence. This secrecy was not about hoarding knowledge but about preserving the sanctity of the alchemical path. The alchemist was expected to approach the work with humility, patience, and reverence. The deeper meanings of the symbols could not be revealed until the practitioner was ready to understand them. In this way, the language of alchemical symbols becomes an invitation to a transformative experience. Each symbol offers the practitioner an opportunity to engage with the deeper currents of the universe, to reflect on their own inner state, and to refine their consciousness. The alchemical process is not a linear one but a dynamic, cyclical journey that mirrors the ongoing process of spiritual evolution. Each step, each symbol, is a part of the larger pattern of transformation, leading the alchemist toward the ultimate goal of spiritual enlightenment. As we move further into the mystery of alchemical symbols, we realize that their significance is not bound by time or place. While alchemy may have emerged in ancient Egypt, Greece, and the Islamic world, its symbols have continued to resonate across cultures and throughout history. The language of alchemical symbolism transcends geographic and temporal boundaries, offering us a glimpse into the universal quest for understanding and transformation. Whether through the Ouroboros, the Philosopher's Stone, or the transformative power of the elements, the symbols of alchemy continue to speak to us, inviting us to explore not only the world around us but also the vast, uncharted territory within. As the alchemical tradition evolved through the centuries, it became increasingly intertwined with the shifting currents of philosophy, religion, and even the birth of modern science. However, the core principles remained remarkably consistent: transformation, purification, and the unity of the physical and spiritual worlds. For those who practiced alchemy, the symbols that they used were not just enigmatic or cryptic markings. They were vessels of knowledge and gateways to profound mysteries. These symbols held meanings that went far beyond the surface of their physical representation, often encapsulating entire systems of thought, spirituality, and hidden truths about the cosmos. Alchemy's development as a spiritual discipline was greatly influenced by the changing cultural and intellectual climates of Europe, the Islamic world, and beyond. In the Western world, alchemy absorbed significant influences from Hermeticism, Neoplatonism, and early Christian mysticism. These traditions held that the material world was not separate from the divine but rather a reflection of divine intelligence and order. Alchemists believed that to understand the secrets of the material world was to understand the secrets of the divine, and vice versa. Alchemical symbols, therefore, were not simply representations of chemical reactions or physical processes. They were expressions of a deeper metaphysical reality, an attempt to map the underlying unity of all things, both visible and invisible. In the Islamic world, alchemy flourished during the Golden Age of Islam, particularly in the 8th to 13th centuries. The great philosopher and scientist Al-Razi, Rhazes, and the polymath Ibn Sina Avicenna were among the most influential figures of this era, and their work on alchemy was pivotal in shaping both Western and Eastern alchemical traditions. Islamic alchemists embraced the synthesis of material and spiritual knowledge, blending the teachings of ancient Greek philosophers, particularly Aristotle and Plato, with the esoteric insights of earlier traditions, such as Hermeticism and Gnosticism. The Arabic alchemists made significant advances in the field of chemistry, including the discovery of distillation and the identification of various substances. However, for them, this material work was always intertwined with the search for spiritual enlightenment, an understanding of the hidden forces that govern both the material world and the inner workings of the soul. The symbolic language of alchemy, as it was developed in both the Islamic and Western traditions, was rich with layered meanings. The symbols were not simply signs for physical elements. They were also representations of the mental, emotional, and spiritual states that an alchemist would encounter during their journey of transformation. Take, for example, the symbol of the sun, which in alchemical thought represented the masculine, active principle, as well as divine illumination and spiritual enlightenment. The sun was associated with the alchemical stage known as the solve et coagula, dissolve and coagulate, a stage in which the alchemist sought to dissolve the impurities of the self in order to solidify the inner spiritual essence. In this sense, the sun was a symbol of spiritual illumination, guiding the alchemist through the process of purification. The moon, by contrast, was associated with the feminine, passive principle and represented intuition, emotion, and the subconscious. The moon was often paired with the sun in alchemical symbolism, symbolizing the duality of the spiritual process, the balance between illumination and shadow, the active and the receptive, the conscious and the unconscious. In many alchemical traditions, the moon was considered the primary agent of purification, responsible for transforming the alchemist's soul and preparing it for spiritual ascent. The sun and moon, together, represented the union of opposites, the perfect harmony of the material and the spiritual. It is also essential to understand that alchemical symbols were not just reflections of external forces, but were also deeply personal to the practitioner. The process of alchemy was considered a path of self-realization and self-purification, an inward journey towards spiritual wholeness. To study the symbols was to contemplate one's own inner state, to reflect on the ways in which one was like the material world, impure, imperfect, and in need of transformation. The alchemists believed that by purifying the self, one could unlock the divine potential within and ultimately achieve union with the divine source. Alchemical symbols, then, were not only guides for the transformation of matter, but also keys to understanding the human condition and the soul's ultimate purpose. As the centuries progressed and alchemy became more closely associated with the quest for material wealth, especially during the Renaissance, the deeper spiritual aspects of the tradition began to fade into the background. The search for the philosopher's stone, once considered a symbol of spiritual enlightenment, became more associated with the idea of material gain. The promise of turning base metals into gold, while always understood as an allegory for spiritual transmutation, became an alluring metaphor for acquiring earthly riches. Alchemists began to be seen less as spiritual seekers and more as charlatans or magicians, caught up in the pursuit of material wealth rather than the higher, more esoteric goals of transformation. Nevertheless, even during this period of material emphasis, alchemical symbols continued to carry hidden meanings. The act of turning lead into gold, for instance, was still understood as symbolic of the alchemist's inner work. The process of transmuting base metals was not just about material gain, but about the transformation of the alchemist's soul, elevating it from the lead of ignorance and base desires to the gold of wisdom and spiritual enlightenment. The creation of gold was seen as the highest form of spiritual achievement, symbolizing the attainment of a purified and enlightened state. In this sense, the alchemist's work was a reflection of their inner journey toward perfection, even if this connection was not always fully recognized by those outside the tradition. This duality of the material and the spiritual, of the hidden and the visible, is perhaps most evident in the symbol of the phoenix. The phoenix, the mythical bird that rises from its own ashes, has long been associated with the alchemical process of transformation and rebirth. In alchemical thought, The phoenix symbolized the death of the old self and the birth of the new. The process of alchemical transformation was seen as a metaphor for the death and resurrection of the soul. Just as the phoenix is consumed by flames and reborn from the ashes, so too must the alchemist undergo a process of purification, shedding their old, impure self in order to emerge as something new and refined. The phoenix also embodies the idea of eternal renewal, a central theme in alchemy. It is a symbol of resurrection, not in a literal sense, but in the sense of constant spiritual rebirth. The alchemist's journey is never complete. It is an ongoing process of refinement, a continual cycle of death and rebirth. This is why the phoenix is often depicted in a circular form, representing the cyclical nature of existence and transformation. The alchemist, like the phoenix, must constantly renew themselves, shedding the old and making way for the new. This renewal is not just a one-time event but a continuous process, a reflection of the eternal cycle of life, death, and rebirth that governs both the cosmos and the human soul. The symbolic richness of alchemy also extended to its understanding of the four elements: earth, water, fire, and air. These elements were not just physical substances but represented the fundamental forces that shaped both the external world and the inner world of the alchemist. Earth symbolized the physical body and materiality, the solid, grounding force that anchors us to the world. Water represented emotion and intuition, the fluid, mutable force that governs the realm of feeling and subconscious knowledge. Fire was associated with transformation, passion, and spirit, the active force that drives change and metamorphosis. Finally, air represented intellect, thought, and breath, the invisible force that connects all things and allows for the flow of ideas and understanding. In the alchemical process, these elements were not static. They were seen as forces in constant motion, interacting with each other in dynamic ways. The work of the alchemist, therefore, was not just about understanding the properties of the elements but about understanding how they interact with one another, both within the material world and within the alchemist's own being. To work with these elements was to engage with the very forces that govern life and transformation, to learn how to harmonize the body, mind, and spirit. In the Renaissance, as alchemy began to be seen as more of a precursor to modern chemistry, its symbolic and spiritual dimensions were often overshadowed by the emerging scientific paradigm. The alchemists, many of whom were also pioneers in early chemistry, began to shift their focus toward more empirical methods of study. However, even as the spiritual and mystical aspects of alchemy began to fade, the language of alchemical symbols persisted, quietly influencing both scientific and philosophical thought. It is only in recent years, with the resurgence of interest in mysticism, the occult, and the philosophical underpinnings of science, that the true depth of alchemical symbolism has begun to be fully appreciated once more. Today, the symbols of alchemy continue to offer profound insights into the human condition, the nature of transformation, and the interconnection of all things. Whether seen through the lens of spirituality, psychology, or even modern science, alchemical symbols serve as a powerful reminder of the ongoing journey of transformation and self-realization. They invite us to look beyond the surface of things and to seek the deeper truths that lie hidden beneath the veil of material reality. For those who are willing to embark on the alchemical path, the symbols are not merely relics of the past. They are living, breathing guides, illuminating the way toward greater understanding and higher consciousness. Alchemy, over the centuries, has woven its way through a complex tapestry of myths, beliefs, and cultural shifts. While much of the historical narrative focuses on the material and physical aspects of alchemical work, the turning of lead into gold, the creation of the elixir of life, and the search for the philosopher's stone, the esoteric dimension of alchemy reveals a far deeper, more profound story. The symbols used by alchemists, seemingly cryptic and obscure, held far more significance than just their material or chemical connotations. These symbols served as keys to understanding not just the nature of the physical world, but also the nature of the self, the cosmos, and the divine. The alchemist's journey, therefore, was not just a quest for external transformation, but an inward search for spiritual enlightenment, personal purification, and union with the divine. To fully appreciate the role of alchemical symbols, It is essential to recognize that alchemy was never purely a scientific pursuit. It was deeply intertwined with spirituality, mysticism, and philosophy. The alchemist, far from being a mere practitioner of chemistry, was often a philosopher in search of the hidden truths of the universe. They believed that to truly understand the material world was to unlock the divine secrets that underpinned it. Their symbols, then, were not just tools of intellectual analysis. They were metaphysical expressions of spiritual principles, aimed at understanding the nature of existence, consciousness, and the divine order. One of the core tenets of alchemy was the idea of unity between the material and spiritual worlds. The famous Hermetic axiom "as above, so below" encapsulated this philosophy, suggesting that the macrocosm, the universe, and the microcosm, the human being, are interconnected. The alchemists' work in the laboratory, therefore, was not separate from their inner spiritual work. To transform the base metals into gold was symbolic of the transformation of the soul, from the impurity of base desires and ignorance to the purity of wisdom and divine understanding. Alchemical symbols, then, were not just images of physical substances or processes. They were reflections of an inner, spiritual journey that transcended the material world. Each symbol, whether it was the Ouroboros, the Philosopher's Stone, or the serpent, represented a step on this path of self-realization and enlightenment. The Ouroboros, the snake eating its own tail, is one of the most iconic symbols in alchemy. It represents the cyclical nature of life, death, and rebirth, a recurring theme in alchemical thought. The Ouroboros embodies the idea of eternal return, suggesting that the process of transformation is never-ending. For the alchemist, this symbol was a reminder that the work of self-purification is a continuous process, with each stage leading to the next. The cycle of destruction and creation, of dissolution and coagulation, is a necessary part of the alchemical process, mirroring the cycles found in nature and in the human soul. The alchemist understood that to achieve spiritual enlightenment, they must continually shed their old, impure self and be reborn into a higher state of being. The Ouroboros, therefore, was not just a symbol of death but of transformation and renewal. Another key symbol in alchemical thought is the Philosopher's Stone, which, while often associated with the quest for material wealth, holds a far deeper, spiritual meaning. The Philosopher's Stone is considered the ultimate goal of alchemy, representing the culmination of the alchemist's work. To create the stone was to achieve spiritual perfection, to reach a state of enlightenment and union with the divine. The stone itself was often depicted as a glowing, radiant object, symbolizing the alchemist's ultimate realization of their own inner light. In many ways, the Philosopher's Stone was a metaphor for the alchemist's own soul, which, through a process of purification and refinement, could be transformed into something divine. The search for the Philosopher's Stone, however, was not just about the attainment of personal spiritual enlightenment. It was also about understanding the divine order that governs the universe. The stone was seen as a key to unlocking the secrets of nature, allowing the alchemist to tap into the deeper forces that shape the world. In this sense, the Philosopher's Stone represented a union between the alchemist's inner world and the outer material world, a symbol of harmony and balance between the microcosm and macrocosm. The creation of the stone was thus seen as an act of divine revelation, as the alchemists sought to align their consciousness with the divine wisdom that underpinned all of creation. The element of fire plays a central role in alchemical symbolism, representing the transformative power of purification. Fire, in the alchemical tradition, was seen as both destructive and creative, capable of both breaking down and building up. The alchemist's use of fire in the laboratory mirrored its spiritual function, to burn away the impurities of the soul and to allow the inner light to shine through. This concept of purification through fire was also associated with the phoenix, the mythical bird that rises from its own ashes. The phoenix, like the fire, represents the process of death and rebirth, symbolizing the alchemist's journey towards spiritual renewal. To be consumed by fire, to be purified and refined, was seen as a necessary step in the alchemical process of transformation. In addition to the sun and the moon, which represented the masculine and feminine principles, respectively, the alchemists also made use of the concept of the four elements: earth, water, fire, and air, In their work, these elements were seen as the fundamental building blocks of creation, each representing a different aspect of both the physical and spiritual worlds. Earth was associated with the body and materiality, water with emotion and the subconscious, fire with spirit and transformation, and air with intellect and understanding. In the alchemical process, these elements were not merely substances to be manipulated in the laboratory. They were symbols of the forces at work within the alchemist's own soul. The alchemical goal was to bring these elements into balance, both within the practitioner's being and in their external work. Earth, as the heaviest and most material of the elements, was associated with the body and the physical world. Water, being fluid and adaptable, symbolized the emotions and the subconscious mind. Fire, representing spirit and transformation, was the active force of change, burning away impurities and refining the self. Air, with its lightness and intellectual quality, represented the mind, the intellect, and the breath of life. Together, these elements formed a harmonious whole, with each one playing an essential role in the alchemical process. This balance of elements was also reflected in the stages of the alchemical work, which were often depicted through a series of symbolic images and colors. The first stage, known as the nigredo, was represented by the color black and symbolized the process of dissolution and decay. This stage was often seen as the death of the old self, the breaking down of the material and spiritual impurities that needed to be purged. The next stage, the albedo, was represented by the color white and symbolized purification, refinement, and clarity. This stage was a period of introspection and inner purification, where the alchemists sought to rid themselves of their ego and base desires. The final stage, the rubedo, was represented by the color red and symbolized the attainment of spiritual enlightenment, the creation of the philosopher's stone, and the union of the material and spiritual worlds. These stages, while depicted in terms of colors and processes, were also deeply symbolic of the alchemist's journey of self-discovery and spiritual growth. The work was not a linear process, but rather a cyclical one, in which the alchemist would continually revisit and refine each stage of the work until they achieved the final realization. This cyclical nature of alchemy is another reflection of the Ouroboros, as the alchemist's journey is one of continuous rebirth and renewal. Just as the phoenix must continually rise from its ashes, so too must the alchemist undergo repeated cycles of transformation, shedding their old selves in order to emerge anew. The philosophical and spiritual dimensions of alchemy are what make its symbols so powerful and enduring. While modern science has long since abandoned many of the esoteric elements of alchemical thought, the symbols of alchemy continue to inspire those who seek to understand the mysteries of existence. Alchemy's fusion of material and spiritual transformation offers a unique lens through which we can explore the deeper forces of nature, consciousness, and the divine. The alchemist's symbols, which once served as a guide for spiritual practitioners seeking to understand the mysteries of the universe, continue to resonate with those who are open to the idea that there is more to life than what we can see and measure. In many ways, the language of alchemy remains a bridge between the material and spiritual realms, offering a timeless message of transformation, purification, and enlightenment. As alchemy's role in shaping both science and spirituality continued to evolve, its symbols, which once served as cryptic keys to understanding the transformation of both material and soul, began to take on more significance in a world that was gradually becoming more empirical, logical, and rational. Yet, the very nature of alchemical symbols persisted as a subtle but powerful undercurrent in the development of Western thought and mysticism. The spiritual significance of alchemy, the idea that the transformation of base metals into gold was not simply about material wealth but a deeper quest for inner refinement, stayed with it across centuries, even as the practice became increasingly entwined with religious, philosophical, and later scientific ideas. One of the most interesting aspects of alchemical symbolism is that these ancient symbols continue to hold meaning for us today, providing insights not only into the worldview of the alchemists but also into the deeper, often unexamined parts of ourselves. Symbols like the Ouroboros, the philosopher's stone, and the stages of the alchemical work, the nigredo, albedo, and rubedo, are not just historical relics or arcane imagery. They hold archetypal value that reflects universal human experiences. These symbols continue to resonate because they speak to the primal journey of self-transformation, self-discovery, and the quest for transcendence. The ultimate aim of the alchemist was not to gain wealth but to purify themselves, both physically and spiritually. The creation of gold was symbolic of the alchemist's process of refining their own character, of transforming their base desires, ignorance, and shortcomings into wisdom, spiritual insight, and clarity. The alchemical work was a process of personal metamorphosis. It was a metaphorical journey in which the alchemists sought to achieve mastery over themselves and over the forces of nature. Through their work in the laboratory, they believed they were engaging in a cosmic act of creation, mirroring the divine creation of the universe. In this sense, alchemical symbols were seen as sacred tools. They were not mere codes or technical designs. They were metaphysical representations of universal truths. These symbols acted as visual shorthand for complex philosophical and spiritual ideas. The alchemist's quest to turn lead into gold was not simply a literal, physical process. It was symbolic of the alchemist's own struggle to overcome ignorance and weakness, to ascend to a higher state of being and understanding. For the alchemist, the laboratory was a sacred space, a place where the elements of the universe could be manipulated in a manner that mirrored the transformation of the soul. Take, for instance, the symbol of the philosopher's stone. Often depicted as a glowing, radiant object, the stone was believed to possess the ability to transmute base metals into gold and, more importantly, to grant immortality. But the immortality that it promised was not a physical immortality. The elixir of life, derived from the philosopher's stone, was not meant to prolong the body's existence. It was meant to purify the soul and bring the individual into alignment with divine wisdom. The true meaning of the philosopher's stone, therefore, was not to be found in its material effects but in its representation of the alchemist's inner transformation. By working toward the stone, the alchemist was striving for spiritual perfection, for the purity of thought and intention that could only come from a deep alignment with the divine principles governing the universe. The search for the philosopher's stone was not merely about achieving personal gain. It was also about revealing the deeper mysteries of creation itself. The stone symbolized a profound understanding of the nature of reality, a level of consciousness that transcended the limitations of the human ego. The alchemist's work in the laboratory was, therefore, a form of sacred knowledge, a quest to unlock the mysteries of the universe. By discovering the stone, the alchemist would not only be able to transform base materials into gold, but also transcend the limitations of the human condition, achieving spiritual enlightenment and a higher state of consciousness. The creation of gold was merely a reflection of the alchemist's internal work, the external manifestation of their inner, divine transformation. Another key alchemical symbol that points to the internal nature of alchemical work is the Ouroboros, the snake eating its own tail. This symbol, which represents the cyclical nature of existence, reflects the perpetual process of transformation that the alchemist must undergo. The Ouroboros is a reminder that the work of self-transformation is ongoing and never truly complete. The alchemist is constantly dissolving their old self and recreating themselves in a more refined, enlightened form. Just as the Ouroboros symbolizes the cycle of death and rebirth, the alchemist must continuously shed their old habits, thoughts, and desires, allowing for the emergence of a new, more perfected version of themselves. The Ouroboros is, in many ways, a symbol of spiritual renewal and the perpetual process of inner purification. The symbolism of the phoenix also echoes this theme of continuous renewal. In alchemy, the phoenix is the bird that is consumed by fire and reborn from its ashes. This powerful image captures the essence of alchemical transformation, the willingness to face the destructive forces of fire and, through that destruction, to emerge renewed and purified. Fire, in alchemical thought, is both a destructive and a creative force. It is the agent of purification that burns away the dross and the impurities of the material world, allowing for the emergence of something pure and refined. In this way, the phoenix, much like the Ouroboros, represents the eternal cycle of death and rebirth, the alchemical journey toward enlightenment and spiritual perfection. The stages of the alchemical work, nigredo, albedo, and rubedo, are also significant in understanding the deep, symbolic nature of the alchemical process. These stages are not merely about physical experimentation but reflect a deeper, spiritual journey. The nigredo, represented by the color black, symbolizes the initial stage of dissolution and decay. This is the stage in which the alchemist must confront the darkness of their own soul, the impurities, the ignorance, the ego, that must be purged in order to begin the process of transformation. The Negrito is often seen as a moment of crisis or struggle, a necessary death of the old self that must take place before the alchemist can move forward. Following the Negrito is the albedo, represented by the color white. This stage symbolizes purification, clarity, and illumination. After the dark night of the soul has passed, the alchemist begins to emerge from the depths of their inner darkness. The albedo is a stage of reflection and self-awareness, where the alchemist gains a clearer understanding of their own nature and begins to realign themselves with higher spiritual principles. The albedo is often associated with spiritual purification and the awakening of higher consciousness. This is the stage in which the alchemist sheds their base desires and begins to refine their soul, seeking wisdom and understanding. Finally, the rubedo represents the attainment of spiritual enlightenment, the creation of the philosopher's stone, and the final stage of transformation. This stage is symbolized by the color red, and it marks the moment of integration, the moment when the alchemist's inner and outer worlds become unified. In the rubedo, the alchemist achieves a state of balance and harmony, and they experience a profound sense of spiritual union with the divine. The rubedo is not an endpoint but a moment of realization that the alchemical journey is a continual process of becoming, a perpetual cycle of self-improvement and spiritual ascent. In many ways, the alchemical work is analogous to the modern psychological process of individuation, as described by Carl Jung. Jung believed that the journey toward self-realization and wholeness was a process of integrating the unconscious and conscious aspects of the psyche, much like the alchemical process of integrating the material and spiritual worlds. Just as the alchemist uses symbols to guide them on their journey, the modern individual must confront and integrate the hidden, unconscious aspects of themselves in order to achieve a higher state of awareness and self-realization. What is most fascinating about the alchemical tradition is its ability to transcend time and place. The symbols, although rooted in specific historical and cultural contexts, speak to universal human experiences that are shared across cultures and eras. The journey of transformation, the quest for enlightenment, the struggle between the forces of light and darkness. These are themes that continue to resonate with us today. The symbols of alchemy invite us to engage with the mysteries of existence, to reflect on our own journeys of transformation, and to seek deeper wisdom and understanding. The alchemist's work, whether in the laboratory or within the soul, is ultimately about seeking harmony and balance, about aligning oneself with the divine order of the universe. The symbols they used were not just tools of practical knowledge. They were spiritual instruments that guided them toward the ultimate goal of self-transformation. The quest for the philosopher's stone, the Ouroboros, the phoenix, and the stages of alchemy represent more than just esoteric wisdom. They represent the timeless human journey toward enlightenment, self-discovery, and spiritual wholeness. Through these symbols, we are reminded that the alchemical process of transformation is not just a historical practice but a living tradition, one that continues to inspire and guide those who seek to understand the deeper mysteries of life. Alchemy, with all its mystique and allure, is often considered a pursuit of the past, an ancient tradition of mystical and philosophical inquiry. Yet, alchemical ideas and symbols have had an enduring presence throughout history, influencing not only the sciences but also shaping ideas about human consciousness, spiritual transformation, and the connection between the material and immaterial worlds. Though alchemy began as a material science seeking to transmute base metals into gold, it soon expanded into a profound metaphysical system with rich symbolism, one that aligned deeply with religious, philosophical, and psychological aspects of human existence. To truly understand the enduring power of alchemical symbols, it is essential to delve into the timeless appeal of these symbols, their psychological and spiritual meanings, and how they continue to guide those on a quest for self-transformation and enlightenment. The symbols of alchemy have an archetypal significance, transcending the material to reveal deep truths about the human condition. The most enduring symbols of alchemy, such as the philosopher's stone, the Ouroboros, the phoenix, and the four elements, are all representations of transformation, renewal, and the cyclical nature of existence. But these symbols are not static or simple representations of physical substances or processes. They are complex metaphors that point to deeper spiritual truths. Alchemists were deeply concerned not only with the transmutation of physical substances but with their own spiritual purification and self-realization. In this sense, alchemy is a language of inner transformation, and the symbols were not just codes but keys to unlocking the mysteries of the soul. One of the most profound aspects of alchemy is its emphasis on the relationship between the physical and the spiritual. The famous Hermetic axiom, as above, so below, reflects the idea that the macrocosm and microcosm are interconnected. In this worldview, the universe is a mirror of the human soul. To understand one, the alchemist believed, was to understand the other. The laboratory, with its apparatus and processes, was a sacred space where the alchemist worked not only with physical materials but with their own inner world. Alchemical symbols represented not only the processes in the external world, but also the internal processes of the soul's purification and enlightenment. The alchemist's journey, therefore, was as much about understanding the self and the universe as it was about experimenting with substances. Consider the symbol of the philosopher's stone. This elusive and mythical object is central to the alchemical tradition. It was believed to possess the ability to turn base metals into gold and to grant immortality, not in the sense of physical life but in the sense of spiritual immortality, an eternal connection with the divine. The philosopher's stone is often depicted as a radiant, glowing substance that symbolizes enlightenment and purity. In this sense, the stone is not just a material object but a metaphor for spiritual perfection, the goal of the alchemical work. It represents the alchemist's quest for self-realization, the ultimate achievement of spiritual enlightenment, and union with the divine. The stone, therefore, is not a physical object that can be possessed but a state of being that the alchemist aspires to, a state of perfect understanding and divine wisdom. In this way, the philosopher's stone is connected to the idea of spiritual ascent. The stone represents the culmination of the alchemical process, a journey of inner transformation that mirrors the divine creation of the cosmos. It suggests that the work of the alchemist is not only about refining materials but also about refining the soul. The creation of gold, as symbolized by the philosopher's stone, represents the purification of the soul, the turning of base desires and ignorance into wisdom and spiritual clarity. The process of achieving the philosopher's stone is, therefore, a process of personal transcendence, an inner alchemical journey that mirrors the transformation of the soul from impurity to divine perfection. This process is reflected in the stages of the alchemical work, nigredo, albedo, and rubedo, which are symbolic of the inner journey the alchemist undergoes. The nigredo, represented by the color black, symbolizes the process of dissolution and decay. In this stage, the alchemist confronts the darkness of the soul, the base, impure aspects that must be purged in order to begin the transformation. This is a stage of crisis and destruction, a necessary part of the alchemical process, where the alchemist must face their own shadow, their unconscious desires, and their imperfections. The nigredo is a death of the old self, an essential step in the process of spiritual purification. Following the nigredo is the albedo, represented by the color white. This stage symbolizes purification, clarity, and illumination. After the darkness has been confronted and dissolved, the alchemist begins to experience a spiritual awakening. The albedo is a stage of self-reflection and introspection, where the alchemist begins to gain insight into their own nature and the nature of the divine. The albedo is often described as a stage of purification, where the alchemist seeks to cleanse the mind, body, and spirit. It is a process of refining the self, of removing impurities and aligning oneself with higher spiritual principles. In this stage, the alchemist moves closer to the realization of the divine wisdom represented by the philosopher's stone. The final stage of the alchemical work is the rubedo, symbolized by the color red. This stage represents the completion of the alchemical process, the realization of spiritual enlightenment, and the creation of the philosopher's stone. The rubedo is a stage of integration, where the alchemist has purified themselves and attained a higher state of consciousness. It is a stage of spiritual union, where the alchemist experiences the unity of the material and spiritual worlds. In the rub-ito, the alchemist achieves the divine wisdom they sought, and the gold they create is not just material gold but spiritual gold, the enlightenment of the soul. The process of alchemy, with its stages of transformation, is mirrored in the alchemical symbol of the Ouroboros, the snake eating its own tail. This ancient symbol is one of the most powerful representations of transformation in alchemical thought. The Ouroboros symbolizes the cyclical nature of existence, the endless process of birth, death, and rebirth. In alchemical terms, the Ouroboros represents the ongoing process of inner transformation, the continual shedding of the old self in order to emerge renewed and refined. Just as the Ouroboros symbolizes the cyclical nature of the universe, so too must the alchemist continually undergo the process of purification and renewal. The work of the alchemist is never complete, but rather an ongoing process of refinement, a perpetual journey of self-discovery and spiritual enlightenment. This cycle of death and rebirth is also reflected in the symbol of the phoenix, the mythical bird that rises from its own ashes. The phoenix is a symbol of regeneration, the ability to rise from destruction and to emerge renewed and transformed. In alchemy, the phoenix represents the process of spiritual rebirth, the continual process of shedding one's old self and being reborn into a higher, purer state of being. Like the Ouroboros, the phoenix symbolizes the cyclical nature of transformation, suggesting that the alchemical work is not a one-time event but a continuous process of inner renewal. The phoenix is a powerful symbol of spiritual resilience, the ability to overcome the challenges of life and emerge stronger, wiser, and more enlightened. These symbols, the philosopher's stone, the Ouroboros, the phoenix, are more than just abstract representations of spiritual principles. They are part of a larger metaphysical system that seeks to explain the process of transformation, both in the material world and in the soul. Alchemy, at its core, is about understanding the nature of change, both external and internal, and how to work with the forces of transformation in order to achieve spiritual enlightenment. Alchemical symbols serve as both guides and reminders of this process, showing the alchemist the way forward and illuminating the path towards spiritual perfection. The spiritual and psychological dimensions of alchemical symbolism are also echoed in modern thought. Carl Jung, the famous Swiss psychologist, saw alchemy as a metaphor for the process of individuation, the psychological journey towards self-realization. Jung believed that the alchemical symbols represented the unconscious forces at work in the psyche, the aspects of the self that needed to be integrated in order to achieve wholeness. Just as the alchemist seeks to purify and refine their soul through the process of alchemy, so too does the individual seek to integrate the unconscious aspects of their psyche in order to become whole. The stages of alchemical transformation, nigredo, albedo, and rub-ito, mirror the psychological stages of personal growth and self-discovery, with the goal being to transcend the limitations of the ego and achieve a higher state of consciousness. The idea of alchemy as a psychological and spiritual process also extends to modern esoteric traditions. New Age spiritual movements, for example, often use alchemical symbols to describe personal transformation and spiritual awakening. These symbols continue to resonate because they speak to universal themes of change, growth, and transcendence. The alchemical process is not merely a historical curiosity but a living tradition, one that speaks to the timeless human quest for understanding, wisdom, and enlightenment. In the modern world, where materialism often dominates our understanding of reality, the symbolism of alchemy offers a powerful reminder of the deeper, more mysterious forces at work in our lives. Alchemical symbols invite us to reflect on our own journey of transformation, to recognize the potential for growth and renewal in every aspect of our lives. The work of the alchemist is not just about transmuting base metals into gold. It is about transmuting the self, transcending the limitations of the material world, and achieving spiritual enlightenment. Alchemical symbols serve as beacons on this journey, guiding us toward the realization of our higher selves and reminding us that the process of transformation is always ongoing, always unfolding. The alchemical path is one of continual renewal, and the symbols are the tools. Alchemy, a centuries-old tradition, remains an enduring source of fascination and mystery in both historical and spiritual contexts. Its symbolism, rich with layers of meaning, goes far beyond the laboratory's material experiments. Alchemical practices involved a deep connection between the microcosm, the individual soul, and the macrocosm, the universe at large. The transformative journey that alchemists embarked upon was as much about inner alchemy, spiritual evolution, as it was about transforming base substances into gold. The symbols that filled the pages of ancient alchemical manuscripts served not merely as technical tools for chemical processes, but also as a language of transformation, offering an intimate glimpse into the alchemists' understanding of the cosmos and their place within it. For the alchemist, each symbol held both practical and metaphysical significance, serving as a guide for the practitioner on their path toward enlightenment. One of the most iconic symbols in the alchemical tradition is the philosopher's stone. This mythical object, often portrayed as a radiant, glowing substance capable of turning base metals into gold, has captivated the imaginations of alchemists, scholars, and seekers alike for centuries. The stone represents the ultimate goal of the alchemical journey, the culmination of a long and arduous process of spiritual refinement. However, the true nature of the philosopher's stone goes beyond the material. While many were drawn to the stone's legendary ability to create gold, the deeper purpose was spiritual. It symbolized the union of opposites, the perfection of the soul, and the realization of the divine within oneself. The search for the philosopher's stone was not merely about achieving material wealth. In fact, the alchemists often believed that the creation of gold was simply a byproduct of the true work, the refinement of the alchemist's inner being. The stone, as a symbol, embodied the ideal of spiritual perfection. It was an expression of the alchemist's deepest desire to return to a state of purity and divine wisdom, a state that existed long before the fall, before the separation of the soul from the divine source. The stone, therefore, was not an external object to be obtained but an inner state of enlightenment to be realized. Its transformation of base metals into gold was a reflection of the alchemist's ability to transmute the dross of the soul, ignorance, materialism, and spiritual blindness into the pure gold of wisdom, clarity, and divine understanding. This concept of inner transformation is central to alchemical symbolism, particularly in the stages of the alchemical work. The process is often divided into three main phases: nigredo, albedo, and rubedo. These stages, while represented by different colors, black, white, and red, are symbolic of the alchemist's journey toward spiritual enlightenment. The nigredo, represented by the color black, signifies the first stage of the alchemical work, the dissolution of the ego, the confronting of the darkness within. This is the stage of chaos, where the alchemist must face the unconscious forces that govern their being. It is a time of crisis where the old self is destroyed, allowing the alchemist to be reborn in a higher form. This stage of inner turmoil and decay mirrors the death of the ego and the breaking down of old, outdated beliefs and attachments. Following the nigredo is the albedo, represented by the color white. The albedo symbolizes the phase of purification, where the alchemist sheds the impurities of the soul. This is a time of reflection and introspection, a period where the alchemist seeks clarity and understanding. It is the stage of spiritual illumination, where the alchemist's mind and heart are purified, and their connection to the divine is deepened. The albedo represents a sense of clarity and enlightenment that comes from confronting the darkness of the soul and emerging from it stronger and more aware of one's true nature. It is a process of spiritual awakening, where the individual begins to understand their place in the universe and their connection to all things. The final stage of the alchemical work is the rubedo, represented by the color red. The rubedo is the phase of completion, where the alchemist achieves a state of spiritual perfection. This stage represents the realization of the philosopher's stone, the union of opposites, the harmonization of the material and spiritual worlds. In the rubedo, the alchemist experiences a profound sense of enlightenment and integration, where the mind, body, and spirit become aligned with the divine. The red color symbolizes the fire of transformation, the burning away of the last remnants of ego and impurity, and the emergence of the true self. The rubedo is not an end but a new beginning, a continual process of spiritual growth and self-realization. These three stages of transformation, nigredo, albedo, and rubedo, are reflected in the alchemical symbol of the Ouroboros, the snake eating its own tail. This ancient symbol, which represents the cyclical nature of life, death, and rebirth, is a powerful reminder of the ongoing process of spiritual purification. Just as the Ouroboros represents the perpetual cycle of creation and destruction, so too does the alchemical work mirror the constant process of self-renewal. The alchemist, like the Ouroboros, must continually shed their old self in order to emerge renewed and refined. Each cycle of transformation brings the alchemist closer to the realization of their true, divine nature. In this way, alchemical symbols like the Philosopher's Stone and the Ouroboros serve not only as representations of spiritual goals, but as reminders of the process of inner transformation. The alchemist's work is not a one-time event, but a continuous journey of growth, purification, and enlightenment. These symbols remind the alchemist that the work is never finished, that spiritual transformation is a never-ending process of becoming. The alchemical journey is one of perpetual renewal, where the alchemist continuously sheds the old self and embraces a higher, more refined version of who they are. It is a process of self-discovery, of coming to know oneself more deeply and more truly, and ultimately, of becoming one with the divine. The symbolic power of alchemy extends far beyond the laboratory. While the alchemical symbols may have originated as a way of understanding and manipulating the material world, their true significance lies in their ability to reflect the deeper mysteries of the soul. The symbols serve as maps for spiritual navigation, guiding the alchemist towards self-realization and enlightenment. They are not just metaphysical representations of processes in nature. They are symbols of the alchemist's own spiritual journey, an inward journey that mirrors the larger cosmic process of creation, destruction, and rebirth. The enduring relevance of alchemical symbols lies in their ability to transcend time, culture, and belief system. Alchemy, with its rich symbolism and deep spiritual teachings, offers a universal language that speaks to the heart and soul. Whether or not one is a practicing alchemist, the symbols resonate with the universal human experience of transformation. Every person, in some way, is engaged in a process of inner alchemy, the transmutation of base emotions, beliefs, and behaviors into something higher, purer, and more aligned with one's true nature. In this sense, the alchemical symbols are not relics of a bygone age but living, breathing symbols of the eternal human quest for self-discovery, enlightenment, and union with the divine. As modern seekers continue to explore the mysteries of the soul and the universe, alchemical symbols offer a rich source of inspiration and guidance. The Philosopher's Stone, the Ouroboros, the Phoenix, each of these symbols represents not only the alchemist's quest for material wealth, but also their journey towards spiritual enlightenment. In the process of spiritual alchemy, the individual is called to purify their soul, to align themselves with divine wisdom, and to transcend the limitations of the material world. The alchemical journey is one of continual transformation, a journey that reflects the deeper, universal process of life, death, and rebirth. In this way, alchemy is not just a historical practice or a set of esoteric beliefs. It is a living tradition that continues to speak to us today. The symbols of alchemy invite us to reflect on our own inner journey, to confront the darkness within, and to emerge from it more enlightened, more whole, and more connected to the divine. They remind us that the process of self-transformation is never easy, but that the rewards are profound. The alchemical symbols offer us a way to navigate the complexities of our own spiritual journey, helping us to understand the deeper mysteries of the soul and the universe. Through them, we are reminded that the path to enlightenment is not a linear one, but a continual process of growth, renewal, and self-discovery. And, like the alchemist, we are all engaged in this eternal work of transformation, shedding the old and embracing the new as we move ever closer to the realization of our true, divine nature. Alchemy, in its various forms and interpretations, is often seen as a path leading towards the realization of higher truths about the self and the universe. The symbols that fill alchemical manuscripts are not merely representations of material processes, but are deeply intertwined with a much grander spiritual and philosophical quest. Alchemists were, in many ways, more than just scientists or protochemists. They were mystics, philosophers, and spiritual seekers. Through the language of symbols, They sought to articulate a process of profound inner transformation, one that could lead them to the divine truths that they believed were hidden beneath the surface of the material world. These symbols were the tools and the keys that allowed the alchemists to unlock the deeper layers of reality, guiding them along the path of enlightenment. Central to alchemical thinking is the belief in the unity between the material world and the spiritual realm. This idea, famously encapsulated in the Hermetic axiom "as above, so below," suggests that the processes occurring in the physical universe mirror those occurring in the soul. In this view, the material world is not separate from the spiritual, but instead reflects and is intimately connected with the divine. Alchemists believed that by understanding the nature of one, they could uncover the hidden forces that shaped both the physical and spiritual realms. To this end, their symbols served not only as markers for understanding chemical processes, but as guides for navigating the deeper, more metaphysical dimensions of reality. One of the most famous and profound symbols in alchemical tradition is the Philosopher's Stone. Far from being a mere object of material pursuit, the Philosopher's Stone was a symbol of the alchemist's inner journey towards self-perfection and divine wisdom. The stone was believed to have the ability to transmute base metals into gold, but this was not its only or even most important function. For the alchemist, the Philosopher's Stone represented the ultimate goal of spiritual transformation, the attainment of enlightenment, the realization of unity with the divine. This was no mere material achievement, but a profound metaphysical and spiritual one. The Philosopher's Stone, in alchemical thought, was an expression of divine perfection, a manifestation of the alchemist's ability to reconcile the opposites of the physical and spiritual realms. In seeking the Philosopher's Stone, the alchemist embarked on a transformative journey that mirrored the process of creation itself. The creation of the stone was seen as an act of cosmic significance, a recreation of the self in its most perfected form. The idea of turning base metals into gold symbolized the alchemist's work to turn the base elements of the soul, ignorance, materialism, and selfishness into something pure and refined. The work of the alchemist was not merely external but internal. They were not simply engaged in changing the nature of substances but in purifying their own soul, elevating it to the divine state represented by the Philosopher's Stone. The stages of the alchemical process, the nigredo, albedo, and rubedo, serve as guides for understanding the transformative work of the alchemist. These stages are not only symbolic of the physical processes that an alchemist might engage in during their laboratory work, but also represent the stages of spiritual and psychological growth that each individual must undergo on the journey to self-realization. The nigredo, often represented by the color black, symbolizes the stage of dissolution, the breaking down of the old self. This is the phase in which the alchemist confronts their shadow, the darker aspects of the soul that must be purged before the work of transformation can truly begin. The nigredo is often associated with crisis, death, and decay. Yet it is through this dissolution that the alchemist makes way for the emergence of something new, something more refined and enlightened. Following the nigredo comes the albedo, symbolized by the color white. The albedo represents the phase of purification, where the alchemist sheds the remnants of their ego and the impurities that still cling to their soul. This stage marks a time of reflection and renewal, where the alchemist gains insight into the true nature of the self. The albedo is associated with clarity, illumination, and understanding, the point in the alchemical work when the practitioner begins to see the world with greater spiritual clarity, free from the distortions of the ego. It is here that the alchemist begins to realign themselves with the divine principles that underlie the universe, purging their mind and spirit of the dross that has accumulated over time. Finally, the rubedo, represented by the color red, marks the completion of the alchemical process. The rubedo is the stage of integration, where the alchemist has fully realized their spiritual potential and has achieved a state of enlightenment and divine unity. In this stage, the alchemist experiences a profound sense of oneness with the divine, a union of the material and spiritual worlds. The rubedo is the moment when the Philosopher's Stone is achieved, not as a physical object but as a state of spiritual realization. It is here that the alchemist attains the highest level of consciousness, transcending the limitations of the physical world and realizing their true, divine nature. These stages, nigredo, albedo, and rubedo, are mirrored in the alchemical symbol of the Ouroboros, the serpent eating its own tail. This ancient symbol, which has been used in various cultures and spiritual traditions, represents the cyclical nature of existence, the process of continual death and rebirth. The Ouroboros is a reminder that the work of transformation is never finished, that the alchemist's journey toward self-perfection is a never-ending process. Just as the Ouroboros is a symbol of the eternal cycle of life, so too is the alchemical work a perpetual process of refinement and self-discovery. The alchemist must continually shed their old, impure self, only to be reborn again, continually evolving and growing toward greater enlightenment. In addition to the Ouroboros, the symbol of the phoenix also embodies this concept of cyclical renewal. The phoenix, a mythical bird that is consumed by flames and reborn from its ashes, symbolizes the transformative power of fire. Fire, in alchemical symbolism, represents both destruction and creation. Just as it is capable of burning away impurities, it also holds the power to purify and refine. The phoenix, in this sense, embodies the alchemical journey of rebirth. Just as the bird rises from the ashes of its former self, so too must the alchemist continually rise from the ashes of their own ego, shedding the old self to make way for the new. This process of constant renewal is central to alchemical thinking, where each stage of the journey is a step towards spiritual liberation and enlightenment. The symbolism of the alchemical process extends beyond the individual and can be applied to the cosmos itself. The alchemists believed that the universe was a living organism, a manifestation of divine intelligence that was constantly evolving and transforming. The work of the alchemist, therefore, was not only a personal journey but a reflection of the greater cosmic process. The idea that the universe itself is in a constant state of flux, moving through cycles of birth, death, and rebirth, is echoed in the alchemical symbols of transformation. These symbols remind the alchemist, and by extension humanity, that all things are interconnected, that the individual journey is a reflection of the larger cosmic journey, and that the work of personal transformation is an essential part of the ongoing process of creation. The four classical elements, earth, water, fire, and air, are also central to alchemical symbolism. These elements were believed to represent the fundamental building blocks of both the material and spiritual worlds. Earth symbolized the body, the material world, and the grounding forces of existence. Water represented the emotions, the subconscious mind, and the fluid, ever-changing nature of human experience. Fire symbolized spirit, transformation, and the transformative power of purification. Air, on the other hand, represented intellect, reason, and the breath of life itself. Together, these elements represented the forces at work in both the physical and spiritual realms, and alchemical transformation involved the harmonization of these elements, both within the alchemist's soul and within the material world. The work of the alchemist was thus a process of balancing and integrating these elements, bringing them into harmony with one another. In the laboratory, the alchemist worked to combine the elements in such a way that they could catalyze the transformation of materials. In the spiritual realm, the alchemists sought to achieve balance within themselves, integrating the physical, emotional, intellectual, and spiritual aspects of their being. Alchemical symbols, in this sense, serve as reminders that true transformation requires the integration of all aspects of the self. The work of the alchemist is not just about transcending one part of the self but about achieving a state of wholeness and balance, where all elements are in harmony with one another. In the modern world, where scientific materialism often dominates our understanding of reality, the symbolism of alchemy continues to offer profound insights into the nature of existence and the human condition. The alchemical symbols, once used by practitioners to guide their work of spiritual transformation, now serve as a source of inspiration for those seeking to understand the deeper mysteries of the universe and the self. Whether viewed as metaphors for psychological processes or as reflections of spiritual truths, the symbols of alchemy invite us to embark on our own journey of transformation, to seek balance and integration in our lives, and to connect with the divine forces that shape our existence. The continuing appeal of alchemical symbolism lies in its universal themes. Alchemy speaks to the human quest for meaning, for transcendence, and for the realization of our highest potential. The symbols offer us a way to navigate the complexities of our own inner worlds, to understand the forces that shape our thoughts, emotions, and actions, and to achieve a higher state of awareness and consciousness. In this sense, the alchemical process is not a relic of the past but a living tradition, one that alchemy, with its symbolic language and mystical philosophies, has often been regarded as a pursuit grounded in both science and mysticism. Its journey through history offers a unique lens through which we can view not only the development of early science, but also the profound psychological, spiritual, and philosophical transformations that have shaped human understanding of both the material and immaterial worlds. At its core, alchemy is concerned with transformation, whether it is the transmutation of base metals into gold, the purification of the soul, or the unification of opposites that lie at the heart of creation. Alchemical symbols, intricate and layered with meaning, were not just methods to describe chemical processes. They were seen as tools for personal and cosmic transformation, a language that could bridge the gap between the human soul and the divine. One of the central tenets of alchemy is the idea of unity, the concept that everything in the universe is interconnected and that transformation is not only possible but inevitable. This belief in unity permeates every aspect of alchemical practice, from the symbolism of the elements to the transformative journey that the alchemist embarks upon. For alchemists, the ultimate goal was not merely to create material wealth but to achieve spiritual enlightenment, to reunite with the divine source, and to experience the perfection of the self. Alchemy was a process of reconciliation, the blending of opposites, the bringing together of the material and spiritual realms to create a harmonious whole. In this view, alchemical symbols were more than just abstract representations. They were living metaphors for the spiritual and psychological processes that could lead to the realization of divine wisdom and inner transformation. The philosopher's stone, perhaps the most iconic symbol in alchemical tradition, encapsulates this idea of unity. While it has long been associated with the material goal of transmuting base metals into gold, the true meaning of the philosopher's stone lies not in its physical properties but in its deeper, symbolic significance. The stone represents the culmination of the alchemist's spiritual journey, a state of inner perfection, a realization of unity with the divine. The creation of the philosopher's stone was not a quest for material wealth but an expression of the alchemist's desire to purify and elevate their soul to its highest potential. In many ways, the philosopher's stone embodies the alchemist's search for the perfect balance between opposites, life and death, material and spiritual, light and darkness. It symbolizes the harmonious union of all forces in the universe, the realization of divine wisdom, and the achievement of a state of perfect equilibrium. This idea of transformation through unity is reflected in the alchemical process itself, which is often divided into three main stages: nigredo, albedo, and rubedo. These stages are more than just metaphors for chemical processes. They represent the spiritual journey that the alchemist must undergo in order to achieve the final goal of self-realization. The first stage, nigredo, represented by the color black, is the phase of dissolution and decay. In this stage, the alchemist must confront the darkness within, the unconscious forces that lie hidden in the soul. It is a time of crisis, of destruction and death, where the alchemist must shed the old self and make way for something new. The nigredo represents the breaking down of the ego, the dissolution of the false self, and the purging of impurities. It is through this process of destruction that the alchemist makes room for the emergence of a higher, more refined self. Following the nigredo comes the albedo, represented by the color white. The albedo symbolizes purification, clarity, and illumination. It is the stage of spiritual awakening, where the alchemist begins to experience a deep sense of clarity and understanding. This is the phase where the alchemist's mind and spirit are cleansed, and they begin to perceive the world in a new light. In the albedo, the alchemist sheds the remnants of their old, unrefined self and aligns themselves with the divine. This stage represents the purification of the soul, the process of cleansing the mind and heart of ignorance, and the alignment of the self with the higher realms of spiritual wisdom. The final stage, rubedo, symbolized by the color red, represents the completion of the alchemical work. The rubedo is the phase of integration, where the alchemist has fully realized their spiritual potential and achieved the goal of self-perfection. In this stage, the alchemist has reconciled the opposites within themselves, light and darkness, spirit and matter, and has achieved a state of unity with the divine. The rub-ito represents the realization of the philosopher's stone, not as a physical object but as a state of spiritual enlightenment. It is a moment of profound insight and understanding, where the alchemist experiences the perfection of the self and the unity of all things. The alchemical process of transformation, however, is not confined to these three stages alone. The work of the alchemist is a continual process of renewal and purification, a never-ending cycle of death and rebirth. This is symbolized by the Ouroboros, the ancient image of a serpent eating its own tail, which represents the perpetual cycle of life, death, and transformation. The Ouroboros is a powerful symbol of the ongoing process of inner alchemy, the continual shedding of the old self in order to be reborn into something new. It serves as a reminder that the alchemical journey is never complete, that the alchemist must continually refine and purify their soul in order to move closer to the divine. In addition to the Ouroboros, the alchemical tradition also places significant importance on the symbolism of the four elements: earth, water, fire, and air. These elements were believed to represent the fundamental forces of the universe, both in the material world and in the soul. Earth symbolizes stability, grounding, and materiality. Water represents emotion, intuition, and the unconscious mind. Fire symbolizes transformation, purification, and the spiritual fire that burns away impurities. Air represents intellect, thought, and the breath of life. These elements were not seen as separate or isolated from one another, but as interconnected forces that needed to be balanced and harmonized in the process of spiritual transformation. Alchemy, in this sense, is not just a practice of manipulating the material world, it is a practice of integrating and balancing the inner forces of the self. The alchemist's journey is one of inner alchemy, the transformation of the soul through the balancing of these four elements. The alchemical symbols of the elements, therefore, are not only representations of material substances, but are metaphors for the inner work that the alchemist must undertake in order to achieve spiritual enlightenment. The process of alchemical transformation is the process of bringing these inner elements into balance, harmonizing the material and spiritual aspects of the self in order to realize the perfection of the soul. One of the most powerful and enduring symbols in alchemy is the phoenix, the mythical bird that rises from the ashes of its own death. The phoenix represents the power of resurrection and renewal, symbolizing the continual process of self-transformation. Just as the phoenix is consumed by fire and reborn from its ashes, so too must the alchemist continually destroy the old self and be reborn into a higher, more enlightened version of themselves. The phoenix symbolizes the ability to transcend death and decay, to rise above the limitations of the ego, and to achieve spiritual renewal. In this way, the phoenix serves as a reminder that the alchemical work is an ongoing process of transformation, a continual cycle of death and rebirth that leads to the realization of the divine. The symbols of alchemy, such as the philosopher's stone, the Ouroboros, the phoenix, and the four elements, are all metaphors for the process of transformation that lies at the heart of alchemical thought. These symbols represent the alchemist's journey towards self-realization, enlightenment, and union with the divine. Alchemy, at its core, is about the integration of the material and spiritual realms, the reconciliation of opposites, and the continual process of inner refinement and purification. The work of the alchemist is not just about transmuting base metals into gold. It is about transmuting the soul, transforming the self into something higher and more aligned with the divine. Through the language of symbols, alchemists sought to articulate a path of spiritual transformation that could lead to the realization of their highest potential. These symbols, therefore, continue to resonate with those who seek to understand the deeper mysteries of life and the universe, offering a timeless guide to the process of spiritual awakening and self-realization. Today, the language of alchemical symbols continues to inspire those on a quest for personal and spiritual growth. The symbols of alchemy serve as metaphors for the ongoing process of self-transformation, reminding us that the path to enlightenment is not a destination but a continual journey of growth and renewal. Just as the alchemist worked to purify and perfect their soul, so too must we engage in the work of inner transformation, shedding the old self and embracing the higher, more enlightened version of who we are meant to become. Alchemical symbols, therefore, are not relics of a bygone era but living, breathing representations of the ongoing process of spiritual evolution. They remind us that, like the alchemist, we are all engaged in the work of transforming ourselves into something greater, something more connected to the divine, and something more aligned with the deeper truths of the universe. Alchemy has always been a bridge between the visible and the invisible, between the material world we can touch and the spiritual realm that governs it. The fascination with alchemy isn't just born from its association with the transmutation of metals into gold, although that certainly captures the imagination. The true allure of alchemy lies in its deeper, esoteric goals that are concerned not only with the external transformation of matter but also with the inner transformation of the self. Through the alchemical process, the practitioner seeks to achieve the ultimate state of perfection, a spiritual and psychological rebirth that transcends the limits of the physical body and the ego. This transformative journey, though presented in cryptic symbols and complex imagery, was deeply human, an exploration of the soul's potential and its relationship to the cosmos. To understand the alchemical symbols and their meanings, one must first consider the alchemist's philosophy of the world. Alchemists did not see the universe as a collection of disconnected, random events. Rather, they viewed it as an interconnected system where everything had meaning, where every object and being, every process, and every symbol held deeper wisdom. This perspective is rooted in the Hermetic principle as above, so below, which suggests that the microcosm, the human being, the individual soul, and the macrocosm, the universe, the divine source, are reflections of each other. In this view, the physical world is not separate from the spiritual but mirrors it in a harmonious dance. Everything in the material world was a reflection of divine intelligence, an expression of cosmic forces in physical form. Alchemists sought to unlock these hidden patterns of the universe through their work, using symbols as keys to decipher the divine blueprint embedded in all things. Alchemy, in many ways, was the search for the hidden essence of life itself. It asked the profound question, what is the true nature of reality? What lies beneath the surface of our everyday experience? Alchemists believed that by understanding the hidden nature of the material world, they could also uncover the deeper, spiritual truths that underpinned it. Their laboratory work, though often misunderstood as simply an early form of chemistry, was far more than an experiment in the manipulation of substances. For the alchemist, the true purpose was not to simply change lead into gold, but to transform the lead of the soul into spiritual gold. The idea of turning base metals into gold was symbolic of the human potential to transmute ignorance, fear, and base desires into enlightenment, wisdom, and divine understanding. Central to this pursuit of spiritual transformation was the concept of the philosopher's stone. Though it has come to symbolize the alchemist's quest for wealth, the philosopher's stone was not just a physical object. It was an allegorical representation of the alchemist's own spiritual potential. It was the culmination of the alchemical work, a symbol of the divine perfection that could be achieved by purifying the soul and aligning it with the divine order of the universe. The philosopher's stone was believed to have the power to turn base metals into gold, but more importantly, it symbolized the ability to transmute the imperfections of the human soul into a state of spiritual perfection. The concept of the stone, much like alchemy itself, is deeply esoteric, and its meaning goes far beyond the literal interpretation. The stone represents both the goal of the alchemist's work and the means by which that work is accomplished. It is a symbol of the divine spark that exists within all human beings, the seed of perfection that can be nurtured through inner work, self-purification, and spiritual discipline. The alchemical journey is not about acquiring external riches, but about unlocking the treasure that lies hidden within, the gold of wisdom, the precious metal of spiritual enlightenment. The philosopher's stone, in this sense, represents the alchemist's true self, the perfected version of the soul that has transcended material desires and achieved union with the divine. The journey to creating the philosopher's stone, or to achieving spiritual enlightenment, is traditionally divided into 3 stages: nigredo, albedo, and rubedo. These stages, often symbolized by the colors black, white, and red, represent the phases of transformation that the alchemist must undergo in order to purify the soul and achieve spiritual enlightenment. The first stage, nigredo, represents the death of the ego and the destruction of the old self. It is a time of dissolution, where the alchemist confronts the darkness within, the unconscious desires, fears, and attachments that have accumulated over the course of their life. This is the phase of crisis, where the individual is broken down, forced to face their inner shadows and experience the darkness of the soul. But it is through this darkness that the alchemist begins to find the seeds of transformation. Just as in nature, where death gives way to new life, the alchemist must go through this painful phase of inner disintegration in order to prepare for the new self to emerge. After the nigredo comes the albedo, the white stage, symbolizing purification and spiritual awakening. It is in this stage that the alchemist begins to experience clarity and illumination. The purification of the soul continues, as the alchemist sheds the remnants of their old, unrefined self and aligns themselves with the divine. In the albedo, the alchemist begins to realize the interconnectedness of all things and sees the universe in a new light. This stage represents spiritual awakening, a state in which the alchemist begins to transcend the limitations of the ego and connect with the higher realms of consciousness. It is the moment when the alchemist starts to gain insight into the divine wisdom that pervades all things, and when they begin to perceive their true nature as a reflection of the divine. The final stage of the alchemical process is the rubedo, the red stage, symbolizing the realization of the philosopher's stone, or the achievement of spiritual perfection. In this phase, the alchemist has fully integrated the opposites within themselves, the material and the spiritual, the masculine and the feminine, the conscious and the unconscious, and has reached a state of unity with the divine. The rubedo represents the union of opposites, the merging of the individual soul with the divine source. In this state of harmony, the alchemist has achieved enlightenment and is now able to transcend the limitations of the physical world, experiencing oneness with all of creation. The rubedo is not an end but a new beginning, a state of continual transformation and renewal, where the alchemist is forever in the process of becoming, of evolving towards higher states of consciousness and divine understanding. Alchemy, in its essence, is not a static practice but a dynamic process of continual growth and transformation. The alchemical symbols, though often cryptic and difficult to understand, offer profound insights into the nature of the soul and the universe. These symbols provide a language through which the alchemist can express the deep, transformative journey that they are undertaking, and through which others can understand the hidden, spiritual dimensions of existence. The alchemical symbols, like the philosopher's stone, the Ouroboros, and the four elements, represent the eternal process of transmutation that lies at the heart of the human experience. They speak to the universal truth that all things are in a constant state of change and that the journey of life is a continual process of transformation, of shedding the old self and becoming something new. In this sense, alchemy can be seen as a reflection of the human condition itself. Just as the alchemist works to transmute base metals into gold, so too does each individual seek to transform their own base nature into something higher, something more aligned with the divine. The symbols of alchemy are not just relics of a bygone age. They are living, breathing metaphors for the ongoing work of self-transformation that each person must undertake. The alchemical process is not merely about achieving some distant goal of enlightenment, but about the continual effort to refine and perfect oneself, to align with the divine order, and to discover the hidden treasures within. Alchemy, in this regard, offers us a powerful framework for understanding the nature of personal growth and transformation. The alchemical process is not a linear progression, but a cyclical one. It reflects the ongoing nature of spiritual and psychological evolution, where each stage of growth is followed by a return to the beginning, a new opportunity to refine and deepen the work. The journey of self-discovery, much like the alchemical work, is not about achieving a final, static goal but about embracing the continual process of becoming. This is the essence of the alchemical philosophy, that the work is never done, that we are always in the process of becoming something more, something higher, and that every stage of transformation is valuable in its own right. In this light, alchemy becomes a timeless practice, a guide for navigating the complexities of human existence. It offers us a way to understand the profound mysteries of the universe and our place within it, to connect with the divine forces that shape our lives, and to embark on a journey of self-transformation that can lead to true wisdom and enlightenment. The symbols and processes of alchemy, though originating in a different era, continue to speak to us today. They remind us that, like the alchemist, we too are engaged in an ongoing process of transformation, shedding the old self and embracing the new, as we move ever closer to the realization of our highest potential. Through the language of alchemical symbols, we are invited to see the deeper truths of our existence, to explore the mysteries of the soul, and to discover the divine wisdom that lies hidden within each of us. The evolution of alchemical thought, its symbols, and its practices has always been deeply intertwined with the spiritual and philosophical currents of the time. It is not just a relic of an ancient practice, but a lens through which we can explore the evolution of human consciousness, the intersection of mysticism, science, and the pursuit of understanding the very nature of existence itself. At the heart of alchemy is the concept of transformation, not only of physical substances but of the soul, the psyche, and even the cosmos. This transformation is often depicted symbolically, through enigmatic and layered imagery, with each symbol carrying both literal and esoteric meanings. Alchemists, with their cryptic language and often hidden messages, were not merely concerned with material gain. Instead, they were committed to a deeper philosophical and spiritual quest, to uncover hidden truths about the nature of reality and the human soul, and to achieve a state of perfection and enlightenment. Alchemical symbols, in particular, are central to the practice, serving as visual representations of these complex ideas. Their use is as much an invitation to delve into the mysteries of existence as it is a roadmap for the transformation of the self. These symbols are not straightforward. They are deliberately obscure, meant to engage the practitioner in a process of intellectual and spiritual reflection. The alchemist's task is not just to decode these symbols, but to internalize them, using them as guides to initiate a profound personal and spiritual transformation. Alchemy is not simply a method of transmuting physical substances. It is a journey of the self. Alchemists believe that through the purification of materials, whether metals, elements, or even the body and mind, they could bring about a metaphysical refinement of their souls, ultimately leading them to a state of spiritual enlightenment. The alchemical process, when viewed in its totality, was not just about achieving the philosopher's stone, but about the journey of transformation itself. This process is represented by various alchemical symbols, each with its own meaning, each marking a stage on the path to personal and spiritual evolution. From the symbols that represent the four classical elements of earth, air, fire, and water, to the more obscure and enigmatic symbols like the Ouroboros or the philosopher's stone, each symbol carries both a practical and spiritual lesson. The philosopher's stone, for example, is not only a material substance believed to transmute base metals into gold. On a deeper level, it represents the goal of the alchemist's work, the attainment of spiritual perfection, a return to divine unity. The alchemical symbols are rich in their ambiguity, and it is this very quality that invites the practitioner or the seeker to engage with them on a deeper, more personal level. Alchemy, in this sense, is not a rigid science, nor is it a mere precursor to modern chemistry. It is a deeply philosophical and spiritual practice that integrates the realms of science, mysticism, and psychology. While the work of the alchemist was undoubtedly focused on material processes, the true meaning of that work was always tied to higher, esoteric goals. In this way, alchemy can be seen as a precursor to modern psychology, particularly in the ways it addresses the process of transformation and the integration of the unconscious. Alchemical symbols can be thought of as representations of psychological processes, metaphors for the deep inner work required to transcend the limitations of the ego and achieve spiritual liberation. Just as the alchemist seeks to transform lead into gold, so too must the individual seek to transmute the baser elements of the psyche into higher, divine consciousness. The alchemical stages of transformation, the nigredo, albedo, and rubedo, are not only symbolic of chemical processes but represent the psychological and spiritual journey that each individual must undergo in order to realize their higher potential. The nigredo, or black stage, symbolizes the death of the old self, the destruction of the ego, and the confrontation with the shadow. It is a time of dissolution and decay, where the alchemist must confront the deepest, most hidden aspects of the self. This stage can be seen as a metaphor for the process of individuation in Jungian psychology, where the individual must confront the repressed and unconscious parts of their psyche in order to achieve integration and wholeness. The nigredo is a difficult and often painful phase, but it is through this darkness that the alchemist, or the seeker, begins to emerge into the light of self-awareness. Following the nigredo comes the albedo, or white stage, which represents purification and spiritual awakening. This is the phase where the alchemist sheds the remnants of their old self, aligning more fully with their divine nature. In the albedo, the individual experiences a deep purification, cleansing the body and soul of impurities, while gaining clarity and understanding. This stage is a time of inner illumination, where the seeker begins to see the world and themselves in a new light. It is the beginning of the alchemist's transformation into a more enlightened being. Similarly, in psychology, this phase can be likened to the process of ego integration, where the conscious mind begins to reconcile itself with the unconscious, leading to a more harmonious sense of self. The final stage, the rubedo, or red stage, represents the realization of the philosopher's stone, the attainment of spiritual perfection and unity with the divine. In this phase, the alchemist has fully integrated the opposites within themselves, the conscious and unconscious, the material and spiritual, and has achieved a state of balance and harmony. The rubedo is a time of great insight and understanding, where the seeker experiences a profound sense of connection with the divine and the universe as a whole. The alchemist, having completed their inner work, reaches the state of spiritual enlightenment that they have been striving for throughout their journey. In modern psychological terms, this is akin to achieving a state of self-actualization, when the individual has fully realized their potential and is living in alignment with their true self. The symbolism of alchemy, then, can be understood not only as a representation of the spiritual process but also as a reflection of the deep psychological transformation that occurs as part of the journey to self-realization. The alchemical process is a metaphor for the individual's journey through life, marked by periods of dissolution and renewal, struggle and insight. The symbols themselves are not just abstract ideas. They are powerful tools for introspection, for understanding the unconscious mind and the hidden forces that shape our lives. When viewed in this light, alchemical symbols serve as a guide for navigating the complexities of the human experience, offering a path toward deeper self-awareness and spiritual growth.